Hi, my name is Katie Garner, and I want to welcome you to this block of time that we have together today. Our focus is fast tracking phonics for reading with the brain in mind. How to use brain science as a roadmap to fast track the code that our kids need every single day as they read and write across the curriculum from as early as kindergarten, really from pre-K. So taking advantage of these backdoor connections, all of this is what we're going to be jam packing into today's time that we have together. And what I really want to make sure that I do is give you a way to anchor the learning so that as we move through this fast pace journey together, you have a place to go afterward to really let things incubate and let you explore further, go down the rabbit hole, dig deeper into the areas that are most interesting to you. So the first way that you're going to do that is with your download pack, which is your handout. And I'm going to talk more about this in a couple slides from now, but this will be the best way to make sure that everything we talk about is grounded and you have a place to go back to get what you need. Now, another piece that's going to ground your learning and be a perfect landing spot for you after session is this Facebook group. I started a new Facebook group. It's called A Secret Story Support for Teaching Phonics with the Brain in Mind. Really teaching reading, teaching writing, teaching spelling, teaching everything that is the code, but with the brain in mind, keeping not just the reading science, which is what we think of as the science of reading and what we know of as the science of reading, but also advancements in brain science as a whole. Much of our focus today is going to be looking at early brain development and seeing what areas we have accessible to us as teachers and to our kids that will let us slip skills in fast and fluidly without hitting a lot of the roadblocks or the landmines that we can typically encounter when we try to go through the front door, whether that's cognitive processing, overall developmental readiness, language and articulation capability, delay, discrimination, auditory issues, all kinds of inherent weaknesses that either early grade learners have, of course, the audience for teaching reading, or upper grade struggling readers have that are causing a lot of the hurdles that they can't quite get across to become stronger readers. So all of that science is going to come into play when we really talk about how these tools are going to make their way into the classroom. It's also a great place to get some resources that other teachers have already created to put these strategies into practice, and they share them freely there. Now, last but not least, as we move forward, I will be drawing some winners from this live session, and you can see the social media links across the bottom of the screen. There'll be links in the packet as well that you're going to download so that we can continue the conversation together after sessions. Okay, now we're going to jump right on in, and I'm going to talk to you about where you are going to find your handouts. So if you go to the website that you'll see on the bottom right hand of your screen, it is www.thesecretstories.com. If you go to that website, you will see at the top of the main page different little windows. And the one you want to look for is workshops. Now, if you click on workshops in the drop-down menu, you're going to see session handout packet. Click on that. That's going to give you an option to either view this in a PDF viewer or to download it to your desktop, because that is a massive download. The graphics are huge. There are anchor posters that are embedded inside of it, part of what I'm going to be sharing and showing you today, because I really do want you to have what you need to jump in and start doing this with your kids. And so to do that, you need kind of like a sampler core piece. So all of that's in there, as well as all that I am presenting today in terms of these slides, including the embedded videos that are in them, because I think all of this comes together for you to really digest what's hopefully going to be a paradigm shift, where you see things from a different perspective and you notice these elephants in the room that are making your job a lot harder and a lot less fun. When you download this, you're going to see throughout this 50+ page kind of pack, these URL links. It could be a clickable link to a video clip where I get into something a little deeper and more detail. It could also be to a downloadable free pack that you can use to enact a strategy I'm going to talk about, or to a research base that will help you kind of get your bearings as to why you're doing what you're doing, so you can tweak it and make it your own and make it bigger, better, stronger, faster, and keep it aligned with actually what the brain science is that makes it work, so that you don't tweak it out of its effectiveness. Now, there's one thing I want to show you, and I was torn about this because it is not something I get to talk about in conference. It is something that I talk about if I do a full or a half day PD, and it is not typically something that in an hour and a half will fit. And because it's so self-explanatory, but yet it's so important, I wanted to really highlight it right now. Typically in kindergarten and first grade, the individual letter sounds can suck up an entire year, and that cannot happen. That can't happen. We don't have that time, and you can't do anything, as you're about to see, with individual letters and sounds. You also need the other piece of the puzzle, which is what letters do when they come together and don't do what they should. So it takes two to tango, and both of those things are what we're actually going to be hitting. So all of that to say, we got to knock out those individual letter sounds fast, super fast. We're talking 2 weeks to 2 months, finished, over, done. And you might be thinking, are you crazy? It takes me all year and then some to teach an L to some of my kids because they are asleep and licking the carpet until like January. True. And they're going to do that. As a matter of fact, when I say 2 weeks to 2 months, I mean pre-K also. And they're really licking their shoe and eating the carpet. And they are asleep until 11 o'clock. This backdoor kind of shortcut is not the one we take traditionally, which is higher level executive processing. We're going to hit muscle memory. Muscle memory is a much more reliable common denominator among early grade learners who are half asleep and licking their shoe. So we can get every single letter and sound into their little heads. And I don't mean just like C says K, I mean it says K and S. I mean G says G and J. I mean Y says Y and E and I. I mean every possible thing a letter can do by itself. Now I'm not talking about phonics patterns. By itself, into the nooks and crannies of every sound a letter can make by itself. And they will have that in 2 weeks to 2 months and in the most likely order. So for C, they'll say K and then S if the K didn't work. For G, they'll say G and then J if the G didn't work. Now they won't know this, but this will be in their lips, tongue, and teeth. So it's all through muscle memory. It's called the better alphabet. So the better alphabet is not a song. It's not a song like you would think of. It's actually a lip, tongue, and teeth training. So all of that to say, you're going to have a clickable link that is the Better Alphabet song. It's going to be right on this slide. You're going to be able to click it. You're going to be able to watch me show you exactly how to do it in a video like this, but it's not going to take up more than maybe 5 minutes. And then you're going to be able to jump in and start doing it. And within 2 weeks, half your class will be done with the individual letters and sounds. But you're not looking for mastery. What you're looking for is a little more than yesterday, a little more than last week, a few more sounds than they had the week before. Every piece of the code empowers kids more and more and more and more. So that's all we're trying to do is fast track access, give them more sooner in a completely developmentally and appropriate play-based way. We're cheating the brain. We're looking for better paths, shorter paths, quicker paths, more streamlined pathways. And we're going to find them in this earlier developing center of the brain, which is this back door. The first one is that muscle memory, and we're bypassing all that higher level processing that may or may not be developed yet. Chances are, and I'll say this one last thing, if you are spending all year trying to teach a K, you are really effectively knocking on a door, and not only is no one home, there's no door. Like if you're trying to break your way through the higher level processing center for early grade concrete learners, you are knocking on a door that not only hasn't been built, that kid maybe hasn't even pulled a permit for the house they might build one day that will eventually have a door. So if you want to find them, you got to head around back and meet them where they are, because that's where you're going to capture them. And that's the focus of everything we're going to talk about from this point forward. So here we go. Now, to really get us into the shoes of our kids, we're going to pretend that we have an imaginary friend group. This is always fun to do. We're going to pretend that you have 3 of your best teacher friends sitting with you. So I want you, with your imaginary friends, to pick who's going to do the writing. Now, clearly, since you have imaginary friends with you, the odds are likely you're going to need to do the writing or this isn't going to work. So you right now volunteer in your group to do the writing. And when you volunteer to do the writing, please don't just do all this in your head. Like, your friends are imaginary, but this activity cannot be. For you to really make the paradigm shift and have a different perspective than the one you've got, so that you're ready to collect and take in everything that we're going to be talking about, you have to actually do this physically. So please, please, please go grab a pencil, grab a piece of paper. Don't just imagine that you're grabbing a pencil and a paper. Your friends imagine pencil, paper, real. So have those in front of you. Here we go. Now you can look up at your imaginary friends, but you have a real piece of paper and a real pencil. And here's what we're going to do. On your paper, make an outline of a brain. And I don't mean draw a brain. I mean, make a lumpy looking circle similar to the shape of the one that you see in that slide. So just takes you 3 seconds, just a little kind of thing like that. As soon as you're done, smile up here at me and make all your imaginary friends smile too, so I can see each group as they're finished. We're going to just really milk this imaginary scenario. Remember, though, you're really drawing this. If you don't do it right now, and I know there's someone out there that's not doing it, you will not have the same clarity of perspective that the rest of us do. So please do this so that you can, this is part of the brain science that we actually understand, which is feeling-based connections. The best way to anchor readiness for a completely shift in your thinking is to actually identify with the perspective of that thinking. Meaning it's hard for us to see other people's perspectives from our perspective. So you've got to get into the shoes of your kids if you're going to see this from the bottom up and not view it as we traditionally do from the top down. So just one more lecture for those lone holdouts who still don't have their pencil and paper. But for everybody that really followed directions well, and you have your pencil and paper and you've been enjoying conversations with your imaginary friends, we are going to move on. And the next thing we're going to do is we are going to pick 10 letters, and this is a group decision. So share with your imaginary friends which letters you think versus them. Pick 10, any 10 you want, stick them inside your brain. So scatter them throughout the brain, wherever you want to put them. Any 10 letters, group decision. I'll give you about 5 seconds to discuss it, and then pick your 10 letters. Okay, finish up that conversation, and hopefully you have your 10 letters by now. Next part, 5 sight words. Now, I'm not going to define what a sight word is other than right now to say that realistically, it's words that you identify by sight. So for us as adults, that's every word if you're a fluent reader. If you're a child, typically we think of sight words along the lines of, the Dolch words or the Fry words or snap words. So it doesn't really matter for this what you define as a sight word. Just pick 5 of whatever you think of sight words being and put them inside the brain. They do not need to connect with your letters, so you don't have to make the words out of the letters totally separate and aside from the letters, other than they're going to all be inside the same brain. So pick your 5 words, put them inside that brain, and when you are done, and this is a group decision again, so make sure you discuss it with your teacher friends. Okay, I can see almost all of you are looking up here at me. If you don't have your 5 sight words, just slap a few more on the page. Doesn't really matter which ones they are anyway for what we're doing. Okay, now the next piece, and this is the only thing you're going to do outside the brain. So outside the brain, draw a picture of your favorite animal. Now, this is where you really do need to take into consideration your friends and their perspective on what animals they like the best, because this has to be a consensus. Again, it's nice when you're working with imaginary friends because they tend to be very flexible and really let you take the lead. So chances are you're already halfway drawing your animal that you yourself picked, but that your friends were in complete agreement with. So whether it is a porcupine or a parrot or a dog or a cow, just do your best to sketch it down outside the brain, because inside the brain is what you know. That's what you know. The animal that you just drew is what you like. Now, in just a minute, you're going to see how the two things converge. The animal that you like, in other words, the picture that you draw, which we do all the time with the early grades, versus what you've got to bring to the table to do something with it. So here we go. Using only what you know. Now, you don't say this to kids because obviously they only know what they know. But you, using what you know, which means using what's in your brain, whatever 10 letters you wrote and whatever 5 sight words you have, I want you to write down what your animal is, and I want you to tell me why you like it so much. Do your best. Now, from a kid's perspective, they're thinking about what's in their brain and what they have to talk about their lizard or their cat or their porcupine. So right now, you're kind of examining right now, I'm assuming, your letters and your sight words. So take a look at them for a second. Maybe you lucked out. Maybe you happen to pick a lot of vowels. Maybe you happen to even have a C, and maybe you have a picture of a cat. So you're 3/4 of the way there. You've got a C and an A. You're just going to have to get a little bit creative with it. T, but you can always skip it. That's what kids do sometimes. Now, remember, you have to tell me why you like the cat too. So depending on what sight words you picked, it might be easy, might be not so easy. Like if your sight words were the, have, it, can, do, she, would, you're going to have to concoct something instead out of those letters that you picked. So depending on the luck of the draw, you are either in really good shape right now or you're not. Now, I will tell you, before I show you a video clip of real teachers, not imaginary teachers, real teachers from different states engaged in this kind of brain fog activity, because it really does set you back a mile in terms of what we ask kids to do and then how they actually are able to do it. But before we look at that, I do something called, and if you do this with your staff, it's fun. I do something called an independent verification. And you'll actually hear that mentioned in this video, because at this point, once you're aware of what you're supposed to do with those letters and sight words and your animal picture, there's a temptation to do something kids are tempted to do too, which is change your animal. Because let's say you had that A and that T, and let's say you even had the words the and the word like and the word boy for your sight words. You're like so close to being able to say like the cat is a boy, and then whatever else you want to say. So you're close. The problem is, what if your animal is a dog and you have no D, no O, and no G? That's when all of a sudden the dog's ears start to become more pointed on your paper, and the dog's whiskers grow, and you just kind of covertly shift your animal to make it match what you have to write with. Kids will do the same thing if they know enough to know that they don't know what they need to know in order to do it. Kids who don't know that, ignorance is bliss. If you don't know what you don't know, you're just going to copy the color words, copy the name tags, and then tell the teacher, hey, this says my dog is smart and he likes corn and onions. What it really says is like blue, green, yellow, pink, Marcy, Carol, John, Bob. But they don't know enough to know that they don't know how to do it. It's the kids who are either higher, sometimes gifted, that start to get tears collecting in their eye, and they start to try to erase the chameleon because they didn't know they were going to have to write about it. And if you would have told them they had to write about it, they would have just made a dog because they can spell dog. And teachers, of course, being smart enough to recognize this isn't possible, are going to do the same thing. So we do an independent verification, which means every group has to hold up their animal to another group, and the other group has to see if they can identify what that animal is. If they're wrong, you have to tell them, nope, it's a duck. And what that does is it gives some sort of check and balance, so your duck cannot magically transform into a camel. Like there's a witness out there now that knows that that was a duck. So now you're stuck with your duck. So we call that independent animal verification, just to make sure that you still stick with the animal that you have. Now, the reason we wouldn't want kids changing their animal, or even teachers, is what was motivating them to write. What's probably going to pull them to want to read is the animal they love, or the rocket ship they want to read about or write about, or the baseball star, or the ballet slippers. Whatever they put down in the best of their ability in picture form, that's what's calling their name. If I've got a dog, I don't want to write about a cat I don't have. I want to write about the dog. So if I know how to spell cat and I just divert and use what it's like just copying sight words off a wall. Okay, well, I don't know how to write about the dog, but I'll just say it's a boy, it's good, it's fun, and I like him so much, and then I'll go play. And that isn't what's going to pull them into reading and writing. And what builds a reader is to read and to write. Writing builds readers. Readers build writing. Writing begets reading. Reading begets writing. The more they read, the better they read. And the more they write, the better they write. But if they don't have anything to read and write with, that can stop that cycle. So all of this to say, here's a little video clip. It's about 2 minutes long. And it's going to show you what you and your imaginary friends probably look like right now. And your brain, great.
What's the first grade word y'all are doing?
I think it's
Okay, the next part. Now, does everybody have their 5 sight words? Yeah.
Yes.
Now, outside of your brain, draw a picture of your favorite animal, but it has to be a group decision as to what your favorite animal is. So you've got your 5 sight words, you've got your 10 letters, they're inside of your brain, so that's the stuff you know, which is a lot, so congratulations, because in pre-K or kinder, you're at the head of the pack, that's under your belt already. You've got a picture of the animal that you love the most, that you're so excited about. So now what you're going to do is, using only those 10 letters and 5 sight words, you're going to tell me what your animal is and why you like it so much. So you have to use only 10 letters. I see one group trying to change their animal. Can't change your animal. If you've got a dog, keep your dog. Don't turn him into a pig.
We're trying to use our imagination.
Yeah, you have to.
Okay, D. Yeah. Do you like it?
Is that a mouse?
No, it's supposed to be a dog.
Oh, I like his ears though. Okay, well, you had some flexibility there. You cut it on either way and I wouldn't know. So what are you guys trying to figure out?
I think a rat.
But that's not a rat, that's a cat, right? See, are you cheating already? That's why we have that done. Are you trying to change your cat into a rat because you could spell rat easier?
Yes, I saw rat.
I just like the way your face looks right now as your eyes are rolling all over your like, so you're gonna see something that's not already there the 18th time they roll over those letters. This spot rum to me. He brings rum to you. Wow. Got him well trained. Is that a college trick he picked up?
It's right.
Is that what he keeps in that little? Now, I love that. What would go at the very end of that?
A period.
A period. Very good. And then I'm going to ask you to tell me what Spot is. Can you tell me what kind of an animal he is?
Not using newsletters.
You mean you don't know how to write? Well, tell me first of all, what is he?
A dog.
A dog. So do you know how to spell the word dog? Like, and keep in mind, that's what you know.
Nope.
Nope, you don't. Can you try?
Sure.
How?
B-O-V.
Oh, that's very good actually, because that's really close. Because I got the ah sound that I need. It's just the d sound. Do you remember that letter that makes that sound? It's so tricky, and I know it's not in your brain. D. That would be a D. That would be the first one.
Okay.
So if you put a D-O, and we'll talk about the letter that you need at the end in just a bit.
Me like the dog. Me like the dog.
That works. That's creative. Yeah, that's a good way to get around that. Is it because you don't have an eye?
Yeah, we don't have an eye.
But me likes dog. That would be a good option. And why do you like the dog? Because you also have to tell me why you like the dog.
The dog is dead.
Do you have letters to make? You do have letters to make dead. Okay, that would work. I guess that would be sad, and I'll refer you to the counselor. But I guess you could do that.
The dog is dead.
You said me like the dog. The dog is
The
dead.
sad dog is lost. The sad dog is lost.
Wait, that's gonna be tricky. Well, you know what? Just do what you can. Just write what you can. I loved that teacher's face at the end when I said, just do your best. She had a word, a picture on her paper. I think it was a pig. And she had no P, no I, or G. So as I walk up to her, she's doing what a lot of our kids do when they're staring at their paper and staring at their paper. And we're saying, come on, you need to get busy. Why aren't you writing anything? And they're, I don't know what to write. Well, that was her situation. She didn't know what to write. So I said, well, just go ahead and do your best. Now I could see she had nothing she needed to do her best with, but I said, just do your best, because really, what do you do with that? Like, you've got a pig on your paper. You don't have a P, an I, or a G up here in your head. And someone's asking you to write what that picture is, but you have absolutely nothing you need to write it with. So what do you do? And when we say as teachers, just sound it out. With what? With what? They don't have a P, an I, or a G. What are they going to sound it out with? How are they going to sound it out? It's just so funny if you step back and you look at the giant elephant that's kind of in the way all the time, because when they have so little of what they need to do this with, it's a constant battle. And it's not that this time isn't valuable as exposure, immersing them in what it feels like as a reader and a writer, but it's so much more value. There's so much more instructional density packed into these activities when kids bring more of the code, just enough to partake more fully so that they can actually reinforce what they do know and build onto it. So that every time they leave the reading and writing table, they have a little bit more than they had when they first sat down. To do that, kids need more of the code faster. If you ask yourself, what do my kids actually have to read and write with? And the answer is not much. Then that's going to dictate the value of every single activity where they're sitting down to do reading or to do writing. And it's not, again, that those time frames aren't well spent by immersing them in opportunities to do that. It's that it's so much better spent. It's so much of more value when they have something to do it with. A few more sounds than they had 3 days ago, 4 more secrets than they had last week. Every bit more of the code brings them closer to and powers them up further with what they can do with it. So that's the goal of the game, is giving them more sooner so they actually can partake more fully and get what is the best teacher, which is experience. Now, hopefully you have a little bit of perspective, or I guess empathy, for the boat that those teachers were in as they were trying to make something out of nothing. And I just want you to imagine one thing for a second. Imagine the traditional front door approach where we do, let's say, a letter a week, or you do as many letters as you can until the kids finally start to make sense of individual letters and sounds. Let's say that a little guy wants to write about his mouse. And let's say he got a mouse at Walmart. He's really excited because he bought the mouse over the weekend. He loves his mouse. He can't wait to come to school and write everything about what his mouse did over the weekend. He's going to go to the library. First thing he's going to do is look for a book about his mouse. So he's sitting there and he's looking at the alphabet train, trying to figure out how to write the word mouse. Now he can scan that alphabet train all day long, but he is never going to find the letter that says ow, because it's not up there. As a matter of fact, if he has to wait and follow a traditional scope and sequence, and bear with me right now because there's a way to follow your scope and sequence. That's not something you want to toss out. You want your scope and sequence, but you don't want your hand shackled by your scope and sequence. Your program's not the teacher. You're the teacher. So the power's in us. Program's not going to teach. That's just a tool for us to teach. So keep that kind of in mind, in the back of your mind for a second, but just remember that your traditional reading series or phonics programs are going to introduce OUOW on the line of kind of sequential instruction in either second grade, either end of first up to mid-second, depending on the program. Now, the problem with that is my mouse will be dead by the time I get the ow sound that I need to write about him. I don't want to write about a dead mouse. I want to write about my mouse right now, because that is motivating me to want to tell you all the cool stuff that you are wanting me to do in this journal. And it's also what I'm going to want to do when I go to the library. Now imagine it's not the mouse, it's my name. My name's Howard. But I think my name is Ha'awa-a-ra-da because that's what it looks like if I just think about the individual letter sounds. Did you know that the least likely sounds letters make are the sounds they make by themselves? Because the more likely sounds are the ones they make when they get together. And those are spread across 3 to 4 grade level years. So I'll have to wait until like the middle of second grade to find out why I'm Howard. Those are the kind of things that are illogical. Those are the situations that we're in every day when kids have so little to bring to the table and they can take so little value away. At the end of the day, the more they bring to the table, the more value they take away every single day, every moment of the day, every day of the week, every week of the month, every month of the year, starting in kindergarten. So that is a really powerful thing to think about. The more we have, the easier it is. The less we have, the harder it actually is. It's almost backwards from everything we think about. And the brain science takes us right there. Now, I want you to look at this. This is a little girl, and I want you to see that she's in TK. She put together, like with building blocks, what she had and made up for what she didn't, and she wrote, "My vacation house." She's got a heck of a lot more than those teachers had to work with. You won't know how she did what she did yet, but you will by the time we're finished, and then you'll have these pieces actually as well. But if you look there, she's got my, because she knows one of the sounds Y can make is I. She's got and I won't tell you why that is, but she knew that much. She has sh for shin because she doesn't know TION yet. But she has another way to build that word. She just put it together with what she's got. It's like building a block of towers, or a tower of blocks, or you build a castle with your blocks, or you build a fort with your blocks. Those are your blocks. You can take them apart and put them together in all kinds of different configurations. She's just building as she goes. And what she doesn't have, she's got something else to take the place of, like SH for shin. And then for house, HOWS. Ow! So unlike the little guy that maybe doesn't know the ow sound, and I'm going to go ahead and show you this just for fun. OU and OW, they play really rough, and someone always gets hurt and says, ow! And that's how she knew to pick one. And she did, and she picked the wrong one. But it shows us as a reader, she's powered up to crack a whole bunch of words, and she could read the word house. And by reading the word house, she'll be able to remember which one looks right to spell it. Right now, she has no text experience in kindergarten, so it's a crapshoot. She just picked one. But here's something important. There's a little superhero O, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And he's flying over OW. That's because he's their all-time favorite superhero ever. And if he ever flies by, they will stop dead in their tracks and they'll go, oh. That's so important that kids have that fallback or default sound, because there are words like glow, flow, blow. Kids need to know, what do I try if owl doesn't work? So the fun thing is these are not rule breakers. These are just the pieces of the code that the poor kids at the early grade levels aren't ever allowed to get. And so they have to memorize everything they can't read, which is the most developmentally horrible thing that there is, to have kids memorizing words when they could just crack them and use that to think at that higher level, to build those higher level processing centers. So that's where we're going to head. I also want to say one more thing about the individual letters. Individual letters are like kids. They behave great when they can't get a hold of each other. You know how when kids are sitting like at their seats and they're spread apart, or maybe if they're on the rug, like they have little squares if you're in pre-K, or there's like 6 inches between them, the letters are the same way. When they're up on your alphabet train and they're spread apart by like 4 or 5 inches each, they do a beautiful job because they can't get a hold of each other. The problem is when they get together. And like kids, when they get together, entirely new behaviors emerge. And that's when letters come together. And they don't do what they should. But what are words other than letters coming together? We don't explore letters in a vacuum all day long. We're not looking at letters by themselves. Our opportunities to deepen ownership and use are coming at us at lightning speed all across our day, but in forms of words, where letters are coming together and they're making completely different sounds than the ones we're harping on every single day in kindergarten and then into first grade. And that's a real problem because it means we're not harvesting the value of all the time spent trying to reinforce this in text that's everywhere, because you can't reinforce what's not happening. Does that make sense? It will, I promise, as we get going. But hopefully it did a little bit, because herein lies the gap between what we know about the brain and how we teach kids to read. We don't teach kids to read based on what we know about the brain. We actually take a brain antagonistic approach. Now, what I mean by that is, who says that T is more or less important than TH? We teach it first because we think, well, T's easier. I actually had a teacher say on Instagram, oh, yeah, we love the secret stories. We use the secret stories, but I don't start telling them until February because we do an intensive individual letter sound study first. Now, I would argue that you can't intensively study a T without knowing about a TH, because you'll be thwarted every time you see a T. Every time you see a T, you're going to see it doing something that isn't what it's supposed to. You're going to be looking at words like the, this, them, they, those. I mean, every other word on every single page of every book you see, T is together with another letter. So if all you know or all you have is that one piece of the puzzle, then you have no way to understand any other part of the puzzle. So you're basically having to unreinforce the skill you're working so hard to teach intensively. The best way to understand something is to understand it from all these different angles. So here's what I would say. Kids can keep track easily of kids that aren't allowed to sit together. Like, they all know they can't sit together. They'll hit each other or they'll spit at each other. They cuss. They know this. This is just like, they know it. They know it. As soon as they walk in the door, they can tell the substitute more than they ever wanted to know about which kids do what behaviors. Well, these two letters, they're not supposed to sit together ever. They're never, ever, ever allowed together, but they don't listen any better than you two do. How many times have I split you up today? Yeah, split apart right now. They can't sit together because when they get together, what they do is they stick their tongues out and go, and that's the sound they make, which is why they're not allowed to be together. But guess what? We look at any book, we look at any page, we look at every line. Guess who we see? Side by side, always where they're not supposed to be, doing what they're not supposed to do. Now, there's not a kid in a pre-K class who couldn't look at that and go, or who you couldn't say to and they couldn't identify the culprit that does it. So why wait? Why wait? Why would we wait? Like, that doesn't make sense. Why would we wait? It's easier than the T. The individual letters and sounds are going to take 2 weeks to 2 months, because that's going to go through muscle memory. That's not there. I haven't really told you what a secret per se is, but a secret's when letters get together and they don't do what they should. So when they do what they should, hallelujah. Like, we don't need a secret when T says T, because that just means all's right with the world. It doesn't make it easy to teach, though. So muscle memory knocks out individual letters and sounds, but you can teach the things that are supposed to be hard instantly. And then the readiness that comes with application is okay to happen as kids start to wake up and smell the coffee, which they're going to get to because you're brewing pots everywhere you go. Every time they turn around, you're going to have opportunities to reinforce that along with all these other things. So what happens is it's almost like you have two running alphabets. You've got this third dimension to the alphabet, which isn't just what letters do by themselves and you just drill and kill that, but then what they're doing when they're together with other letters, which just gives you credibility with everything you said about them individually. Because what they're doing individually makes much more sense when they don't do it if there's a reason, which is there's a secret that you don't know. That helps them digest and believe both both pieces of logic. It lets you lay a breadcrumb trail. Now, I already mentioned this about T. We also do this terribly confusing thing every day when we tell kids, and we're singing the alphabet song, Y says yo, yo, yeah, 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 and we're pointing to the Y. But the problem is, as soon as we sing that song, we go to our calendar. And on our calendar, we show them words like today is Sunday, or January, or July, or May. Or we read a big book that's by a certain author. Or we tell them, make sure you pick the right bathroom. That's the boys' bathroom. So before 5 minutes have passed, we have assigned that letter Y, that it could say E, it could say I, it could say A, it could say Oi. Pretty much to a kid, it looks like it can do whatever the heck it wants. The only real good debt to hang your hat on when it comes to the brain being able to find a pattern that's consistent, at least more often than not about Y, is that it won't say yeah. That's really the only pattern you can hang your hat on. Is I don't know what it will do, but the one thing I'm pretty sure about is it's not going to say yeah. Because other than words like yes, yellow, you, or yak, good luck finding the letter Y, making the one sound that we actually tell kids to expect it to make in a print-rich K2 classroom. Because every other thing it can do is everywhere. Our favorite words are mommy, candy, daddy. The calendar, like I said, that's our biggest problem. So every time they turn around, every book is by a different author. Every day they use the boys or don't use the boys' bathroom. So this is why holding what's supposed to be a phonics skill, positional sounds of Y, until end of second grade, which is when programs will address it, makes no sense. Because all it does is it thwarts our ability to teach that Y says yeah, because it actually never does, and the brain is a pattern-making machine. So we don't have to necessarily explain a phonics pattern. In fact, we don't have to, because we're not teaching, we're giving. We're going to make things make sense, and that's where I'm headed next. But what we are doing is setting the stage for, hey, when letters don't do what they should, it's just because there's a secret about them you don't know. So it gives us credibility when we say something and then it never works. And it keeps us from having to say, oh, it just is, it just does. You just have to remember. I feel like right now we sometimes have to put on a dog and pony show and just hope they don't connect the dots. Because if anybody's actually paying attention to what I say from one moment to the next, I'm going to look insane. And you're going to wonder why I'm teaching, because I am no sooner going to be pointing to the Y and telling you one thing, then you're going to see me point to it 1,000 more times and say something different. I'm going to point to the T and tell you that it says T, and then we're going to read a book that's going to have words like this and they and them and those and the on every single page. And unless the book is about Tommy and his turtle trotting to Toronto, you will not be able to validate anything I'm telling you to expect. And I'm going to do this times every letter we have. This is where we get so little value out of all the text experiences that we offer in Kinder and First, because they're not matching up to the patterns that kids have access to early on. And that's why the fast tracking is so critical, because the more of the puzzle you have, the more the puzzle actually makes sense, and the more you can do with it every single day as you get more and more and more. Now, this is kind of shifting, looking at taking this thing called phonics and transforming it from brain antagonistic to brain compatible, so that we're not fighting the current, we're riding it on a wave. And that means we work half as hard, we get twice as far. When you fight the brain system for learning, you have to work twice as hard and you get half as far. So it's exhausting. And at some point you don't even bother trying anymore. Certainly kids don't. The most important time frame for all of this to take shape is the earliest possible grade levels, because that is the unharvested time that we're checking boxes, but we're not necessarily getting the milked value from the time spent to check those boxes. So we know from research that early, intensive, and expert literacy instruction is the key at the earliest possible grade levels. But if you're like me, I got a master's in reading. I got no phonics, nothing at all. I got tons of philosophies about how everybody believes we should teach reading. I just didn't get anybody to tell me what to do when I'm locked in a room with a kid and whatever reading series they throw at me, and then get him reading. And that was so frustrating to me. And it really did send me off on this journey. And you can read in my bio a little bit about what that journey consisted of. But it's right there. Science carves a very clear path. And I don't mean science as in picking a side, balanced literacy, science of reading. The science of reading is definitely advocating following the brain science, but there's a lot more brain science than just that piece. There's social emotional learning that's critical. There are feeling-based neural networks. And we're going to talk about Mary Helena Mordino-Yang, who's a Harvard neuroscientist. And the entire focus of her work is anchoring concepts that can be given non-consciously by rooting them in feelings and already existing social and emotional understanding, and bypassing the repetitious use and practice longer way around. Now, I am going to tell you that of my goal today is to give you a deep in the gut ownership of everything that you need to get a kid reading. And that means if they lock you in a room with a kid, a pencil, and a back of a magazine cover, you can teach that kid to read. If you're fortunate enough to have a reading series, that's just all the better. Now you have some extra stuff or tools that you can use. The reading series, as you hear me talk about it, or even if you have a phonics program, those are your playground, but you're the teacher. The program's never the teacher. So the deep in the gut ownership belongs to us because playgrounds come and go. We get different reading series all the time. Our skill set is ours, and that we take with us. And then we just make use of all the stuff we're given to use as tools to get us where we already know we need to go, and we already have what we need to get our kids there. So that's my goal today, is to arm you with everything you need, make everything make sense. So here's how we shift it all around and make it make sense. Now, I just did my alphabet song, let's say, and as I did it, and I didn't do the better alphabet song. Let's just say I did whatever you do that's normally done that's just going to hit this simple sounds. So you did your little alphabet song and you pointed to your picture and you probably had like an apple or something on your A picture. And so you said that A said at an A when you sang it. And now you're going to walk over to the calendar because it's August and you're going to point to the identical looking capital A, but this time you're not going to say or A. You're going to say, as you ask the kids to read with you, boys and girls, read with me as I track this word, August. Now, if anybody's actually paying attention, that makes no sense. That makes no sense at all because that capital A looks exactly like the one over there, except over there, when you pointed to it, you said or A. And now you're pointing to it and you're saying and if memory serves, I think there was another letter in the alphabet that actually said and that ain't it. So you're like the scarecrow from the Wizard of Oz doing this. Now, at the end of the day, you may be thinking, what doesn't really matter? My kids don't even know anyway. They don't even know like a letter from a number from a squirrel. Okay, maybe that's true. But with that logic, why bother? Like, why do it? Like, if the goal of the game is, look, nobody's watching me anyway, I could do anything I want to up here and nobody cares, then just sit in your chair and read a magazine. It doesn't really matter. Like, the only reason we're actually doing this is we're hoping somebody out there is paying attention to us and connecting the dots, following the breadcrumb trail that we're working so hard to leave. Now, there is actually somebody that's paying attention. His name is Johnny, and he came in on the first day of school with a note pinned to his chest from mom to tell us he was gifted. So he knows the letters, or at least most of them. He knows a lot of his sounds. And when he first saw the word August on the calendar, and he saw us say August and point to the A and say he shot his hand up right away and said, why? Why is that word August? Because I know A says an A and O says and that's not an O. So why is that word August? Now we want the why. Why is critical thinking happening in real time? So it is what we're trying to foster and elicit in our lessons. We want kids to analyze, to logically deduce. We want to engage the brain as a pattern-making machine by letting it connect dots between what it knows and what's not making sense based on the patterns that are accumulated so far. So what we really want to do is encourage kids to follow the breadcrumb trail. Think through this. Look at what you know and compare it to what you see, and then figure out how those two things go together. And so Johnny's just dropping this in our lap. It's happening in real time, and we want to encourage it. We'll foster entire lessons, or we'll create entire lessons just to elicit this type of critical thinking, higher level problem solving analysis. So to have it just occur naturally as part of a daily routine with something like a calendar is ideal. The problem is, as soon as he asks, and because this is letters and sounds and phonics related, our answer is almost always the same, which is, it just does, you just have to remember. And nothing shuts the why off faster than that. Because what that does is it tells the brain to stop doing what it does best. Stop patterning, stop thinking, stop spinning your wheels, stop trying to connect the dots, stop looking for the breadcrumbs. Let it go. It just is. It just does. You just have to remember. That's the opposite of what we want kids to do. We never want to tell kids to stop thinking. And yet, if we tell them it just is, it just does, we're telling them there's nowhere to go with this. Let it go. What we're really doing is we're telling them that we're going to teach the reading and not the reader. In other words, we're going to memorize the word. I'm going to teach you the word August. I'm not going to teach you how to read the word August, but I'm going to teach you the word August. And then in September, I'll teach you the word September. And by September or October, you'll probably have forgotten the word August because none of it was really yours to start with. I'm not teaching the reader. I'm teaching the word or the reading. And we're going to talk a lot about that. Teaching the reader is where you give them the tool they need to crack that word and hundreds of other words with the same building blocks in them. So that's the game we want to play. That's where we want to take this. This is going to be a daily wall that we're going to hit until September rolls around. So we're going to maximize the instructional value of the time that we're going to spend every darn day across the month of August looking at this calendar. We are going to take something out of this time because our time is too precious to waste. So here's how we're going to turn this entire thing around from front door to back door. In the front door world, in the traditional world, there is no logical explanation to give when kids ask why letters do what they do or why they make the sounds that they make. There are phonics rules, but phonics rules have no inherent personal meaning. In other words, it's an organizational structure. The rule about K is that it says K. If you ask why, it's because it does. It just is, it just does. And you just have to remember that's a K and it says K. So that's not the kind of logical explanation that the brain inherently craves. We want to feed the brain in a way that makes sense based on what kids already understand and know to be true. And that requires using some of Einstein's logic. And there's a great quote by Einstein that is similar to what I'm about to say. If the facts don't fit the theory, sometimes it's easier to change the facts. So if the fact is that there is no logical explanation that's meaningful to give kids about why letters do what they do, well, now there is. Now there are. Now there are perfectly logical explanations to give. It's just that they're secrets. Yeah, see, there's a reason you can't read this word. It's because there's a grown-up reading and writing secret in this word. And that's why it looks like it's August and it's not working because you don't know the secret. See, there are secrets in a lot of words. Anytime you see a word where letters aren't doing what they should, it's because there's a grown-up reading secret in it. The problem is these are big secrets. And I've got to be careful because if I tell you a secret that's too big for you to hear, your brain could explode. Yeah, and I don't want that to happen. I'm sure you don't want that to happen either. Now, quick side note, if you teach kindergarten, be careful. You'll set your criers back off with that one until they've learned your sense of humor. If you're in first grade, you're probably safe unless you don't have a sense of humor, in which case, again, take that with measured balance because there's a significant motivational factor behind turning these skills into these grown-up reading and writing secrets that are so big that their brains have to be ready or they could explode. And the motivational factor is that we want to turn the tables so that it's I've got it, you want it. I'll decide if you can have it, but this is big. Like I've never told a kindergarten class the secret's in this word. I didn't even tell my first graders this secret. This is a second grade secret. Now you are one of the smartest looking classes I've ever had. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe you are ready. I'll think about it. Let me see what the behavior report is I get from the music teacher. And then maybe I'll tell you the secret that's in this word. Now, there's all kinds of ways you can play this up, but the goal of it is that you're using the brain against itself and you're creating the need to know or the desire on their part instead of you having to put on a dog and pony show just to keep their attention in the hopes that they even care enough to try to listen to the skills that you know are so important that you want them to learn. That's a losing battle. We want it to be on their end. We want the importance to be on their end. We want them to come after us and beg us for it. And every time letters don't do what they should, that triggers them to think there's a secret she didn't tell us. So even if they don't remember what that secret is per se in that word, it gives us a way to set the stage for letters doing what we know they're going to do, which is not make the sounds we say they should. In other words, it gives us an out. And it satisfies Johnny and it's going to satisfy our other guys because guess what's happening right now? Every kid in my class is staring at me like they can't wait to hear what I'm about to say because they don't want to be left out. Now, why are the kids who have no idea what a letter even is looking at me like they have any interest in this conversation? Because it's a secret. It's a secret. Secrets make things important to kids. Secrets actually have a physiological power that's incredibly important. And it's not just secrets. It's actually triggering something called a need to know. Need to know marks information for memory and prioritized learning in the brain. Anytime you can trigger learners' need to know, you immediately open up this backdoor pathway that's short, sweet, quick, and fast to get that information right in and stick. If what you toss out is actually part of what makes sense with the patterns they've already got. Now, we'll get there in a minute. Right now, all I want to do is trigger a need to know. And I want to trigger it in kids who don't know enough to need to know. Like Lulu, who's been eating her shoe this whole time. She has no need to know. other than there's a secret coming and she didn't want to miss it. So secrets are a good way to cheat. I'm going to show you another way to cheat to get a need to know with kids who don't know enough to need to know. Johnny was easy. He had an academic need to know. Other kids could be all over the map in that regard. Bottom line is, if I say something, I want to get some value out of it. I don't want to say it 45 times. I want it to have the best chance to stick. So if I can trigger a need to know, what I do is I actually create a slight pulse rise, an adrenaline hike. It's imperceptible. It's not like your kids just jump off the wall, but it's enough to act as a memory fixant and give that information a stronger anchor. It's like throwing a ball with a catcher already in place. If you toss out information that nobody wants, nobody asked for, and nobody cares, it's like throwing a ball to an empty field. You know, you might get lucky and hit someone on the arm as they walk by, but the odds that they're actually going to have it, grab it, catch it, hold it, put it in a pocket and be able to get back to it and use it again, bazillion to one. So you got to have a catcher's mitt in place before you waste your breath to toss something out that nobody else is going to hear. That's the biggest time saver of all. So that is one thing that secrets can be used for. And there's another way to cognitively prime your learners. So now that I've got everybody's rapt attention, I'm going to tell them that these two letters in this word August are actually in love. They have this huge crush on each other. And I'll make the picture a little bit bigger. They have this big crush on each other. And anytime they have to stand like right up against each other in a word side by side, they get so embarrassed that they always put their heads down and they go, ah, ah. And that's the sound they make, guys. Now you're going to have this poster in your pack. That's the sound they make. And it's not just in this word August, but look over here. Look at his name tag, Austin. Look at this word, look at that word, awful. You know, if you didn't know the secret, you'd think that word was awful, or you think this word was awa, or you might call him Austin. But see, now you know the grown-up reading and writing secret. So you're teaching the reader, not the reading. When I went through all those words, I don't have to teach those words. I don't have to teach you the word August. I'm giving you a tool, a building block to crack hundreds of words. Any word, even spaghetti sauce on the lunchroom menu. I'm teaching the reader, not the reading. Teaching the reading is where every day I come in and do a dog and pony show where I sing the alphabet and then I tell you that word's August. And I hope and pray that by the end of August, I have taught you that word August. And then when September comes, I am fully aware that you will probably forget that that word is August. So teaching the reader means I'm giving you a tool that you can use to crack August and 1,000 other words. And I'm going to be looking for them today too. And so are you. We're all going to be looking to spot these secrets everywhere they are in text. The more you have, the more you spot, the more you can put together words that then you know. So that's the cycle that we're hitting. Now that lets Johnny do something interesting. Is Johnny, when you tell him that secret, he's going to give you a big brain burp. He's going to go, oh. And that's what we want, because that means we connected the dots. He was able to connect the patterns he already had with something that we just said that fit perfectly together with it. He created an if not, then this. That's the brain system for learning. Here's what it should look like. If it doesn't, here's why. It's a default system. So all of this to say we want that pattern making machine fed with every piece of our instruction, and we want those connecting moments. You don't have to memorize what just makes sense. So this is a huge time saver. Now, here's the trick though. Johnny's not the important person, it's Lulu. And the best example of Lulu was I did a PD for a school district. And at this PD, I had a full day. It was in the summer. I had K2 teachers in the morning, 3-5 in the afternoon. This was the daughter of the 3-5 teacher group. And she was beautifully behaved. She sat on her mother's phone the entire day. I guess they didn't have a sitter. She had just turned 4 and she played on her mom's phone. So she was doing this. Now, she looked up one time and it was when I said that these 2 letters were in love. And I said, ah, and she did this. She looked up at her phone and she went. And then she kind of looked at me and then she looked me up and down. She even got out of her seat a little to double check. And the reason she did is she had a need to know. Her need to know is she having a stroke? Did she just fall over? Will the ambulance be coming? Is something really cool and fun going to happen right now? So her need to know came from or was triggered by something novel, something unusual, out of the ordinary, unexpected. In this case, it was a vocal inflection with me going, ah. It was a quick change body gesture that caught the corner of her eye. And all of that triggered her attention gave me this higher level, focused, concentrated, heightened state of alert. Remember we said marking information for memory and prioritize learning in the brain if we can trigger the need to know. So I got that state of alert for about 5.5 seconds. That's how long she studied me to account for her need to know, which is what the heck's going on. During that time frame, I said something that made sense to her, which is that these letters are in love. And what I did to depict that also connected with what would make sense if you were in love. Now, the reason all that's important is what happened next. I went up to this little girl after a break. So it was about an hour later. We took a break. We came back. I went to this little girl and I said, could you tell me what these letters say? And her mom said, she just turned 4. She doesn't know any letters. Like, she's an early birthday. I said, this is just an experiment. Can you tell me what these letters say? And the little girl went, ah. Now, that's not reading yet, but that's seeing a symbol, sound pops out of her mouth. And she did it exactly like that. Same head tilt I had, same vocal inflection. She even put her little arms together and wiggled. Ah, she's not ready to plug that in to read yet, but that's something upper grade struggling kids can't do. They can't just see a symbol and have a sound instantly pop off their tongue. You have to practice that every day for a week and then hope the next week they don't forget it when you teach them the next one. So it's fascinating that I wasn't trying to teach. She wasn't trying to learn. She just looked up at the perfectly wrong or right moment, however you want to look at it. And she got stuck with this information. It just got stuck in her head. And she's got what is the stepping stone to what a reader will need, which is see a symbol, sound pops out of your mouth. Now, at the end of the workshop, I did a little experiment. I put about 10 posters like this with these secrets on them on a wall, on a board. And I went to the little girl and I reversed it. And I said, could you go point to the letters that go, ah? And she was able to take the sound and identify the culprit that makes it. That's a stepping stone to what will become writing or spelling or encoding, which is here's the sound I need. What symbol can I use to put it down on paper? So she's got the 2 hardest parts of both reading and writing already there. She just doesn't have a place to plug them in yet. But if she were in my class, I'd be modeling the heck out of this key all day long because that's what this is. It's a key. And it's going to get me through a lot of doors. The reason that I taught it was the first door, which is that every darn day it's August. And every darn day I have to follow my alphabet train song up with the calendar time. And I am faced with this door that is August that we have to unlock. And hopefully unlock it in a way that doesn't lose all credibility with what I just did over here. So I am going to be using the heck out of this key. I'm also going to use this key if we read the book, Alexander and the Terrible, Awful, Horrible, No Good Day. Or if we go to the cafeteria and it's spaghetti sauce that we're going to have or not on our spaghetti. There's 1,000 times that I will be able to use this key. If school did not start in August, I wouldn't use this key first. Actually, you know what I would do? If school started in September, I'd teach this one because ER, IR, and UR are terrible, awful, horrible, no good drivers. They always slam on the brakes and go, ah! But this is the only part of the word September that won't make sense with the individual letter sounds. So if I'm teaching the individual letter sounds, which means there's my breadcrumb trail, I'm expecting them to make the sounds those individual letters make. So when I get up and look at the word September, I can't go September. I need to go September. And if I'm going to say I've got a big hole in my breadcrumb trail. And the brain is a pattern making machine. So you want to keep that fluidity going on in your instruction. Keep it fluid, which means they need to know there's a secret. And it just gives you this perfect opportunity every time, even if you decide not to tell them the secret yet, because maybe their behavior wasn't so hot at lunchtime. You can hold secrets back, but it lets them have a way to account for the discrepancies in a way that's easily accessible and then that you can use every other opportunity you have, and so can they. And what this lets you do is maximize the value of every word that's everywhere. Text abounds. The question is, what do our kids at the earliest grade levels have to do with it? Do they have anything to make sense of it with? The more building blocks they have, the more familiar things they're going to see, the more they can start testing out those processes. And it just fires up your entire day because the letter sounds are powered up by secrets and secrets are powered up by individual letters and sounds. It takes both to tango. Now, I'm going to skip this part because of time, but basically back door, front door, you'll see a lot of issues, a lot of landmines that can block learners' paths when we're teaching things along a traditional trajectory. So when we tell kids letters and sounds just have to do this, or it just does, or it just is, or you have to remember, as opposed to giving them a way to connect with it. And it's not just giving them a little story or a little trick. It's not that at all. There's a whole nother level of power that we're going to look at as to going with what they know, using what they already understand, taking advantage of existing patterns of understanding to connect with content they've never seen before. So this gets us into what some of the pitfalls are with our speech and language delay kids, with our ELL kids, with kids who struggle with dyslexia, or kids who struggle with things that tend to mirror dyslexia, because oftentimes not connecting the dots in the way that we know with regard to brain development and the process of learning can manifest as something very similar to organic dyslexia. Now, here's how this happened. Here's how that 4-year-old was able to instantly give me back the sound when I showed her the symbol, or the symbol when I showed her the sound. So this is what she did. Her brain development is back to front. So the brain develops back to front. By back to front, the earlier developing area of the brain that we're talking about is the social emotional systems, the feeling-based networks. So that is the area of the brain that we're actually tapping with this. The higher level executive processing center is what you see toward the front. It is the part of the brain that's going to connect these as sounds with symbols and then identify additional letters that come into play as a sequence that then creates what's called a phonics pattern. And then they have to segment words in order to hear the sound. When that little girl gave me back that sound, she wasn't thinking lip position, tongue position, mouth shape sounds like. She was feeling a feeling, and the feeling created the sound. Ah, that's all she did. She just felt the feeling, and then the sound came out. Totally different area of the brain retrieving that than if she would have had to think along the lines of traditional instruction, which is which word, which sound, what's the mouth shape? Is it tongue position, lip position, ah, as in August, awesome, awful, or is it ah, as in apple, or blah, 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 or EUEW, or AUAW, or OUOW, all of those different patterns and higher level academic concepts that our kids certainly in kindergarten are not ready for. And that's why this takes 3 to 4 years to go through the back door or the front door. But when you go through the back door, you don't have to rely on any of that being in place. All of those holes, if you're working with upper grade learners, are irrelevant because you're slipping something in a place that is already working, already primed, already developed. The social emotional systems are actually the areas kids use to tattle with. They're also the areas that let them know how it feels when no one plays with them or when they get to be the line leader. It's the way they can keep track of who the line leader is, who the line leader was, who got fired, what the punishment was, what the principal said they were going to do. All the things that they keep track of and drive your substitute crazy with come from that area of the brain. That area of the brain is very capable of maintaining a lot of information and actually using it to process new information. Now, here's the rub. How do we cheat? How do we tap into that part of the brain when obviously that is not the part of the brain that's supposed to be kicking in to capture this skill? Letters and sounds and phonics have nothing to do with feeling. You should feel nothing when you're looking or talking about letters and sounds, unless we cheat. Brain plasticity lets us play with what areas of the brain we can engage or trigger based on how we encode or wrap up the content. So if we want to wrap up letters and sounds with a social, emotional, feeling-based disguise, we can trick that area of the brain into engaging and actually grabbing and keeping that information and retrieving it to give back. That's why when the little girl gave us the sound back, she had the same head tilt. She had the same arms up like this. She had the same kind of wiggle. And the same vocal inflection, ah, because it was coming from the area of the brain that connected with that feeling, that understood that connection. Now, once we move it in there, once we front load that code, now we have an opportunity to start building that higher level thinking network because we've got some meat to play with. We've got some opportunities now to bait the brain by pointing out things when we spot secrets. I spotted a secret in our math direction. Does anybody see that? Or I spotted the word paw. I see a secret in the title of our book that we're reading right now, because this is my key to unlock that door and thousands of other doors. So that's where you have flexibility in who does what when, because you're so far ahead of the game. There's no worry. There's no pressure. Developmentally, they can wake up and smell the coffee whenever they darn well please. It's like a buffet, and you're just laying these things out on a buffet in case you need them. Cake's over there. If you have a hankering for it, go for it. If you want some salad, it's over there. Maybe you want some steak and some chicken. It's all here. Grab what you need. All I know for sure is you're going to need it because we're going to see it. It's going to be everywhere. Regardless of whether we teach kindergarten or not, these letters come together in words that we have to actually read. Now, we don't usually read them. What we do is memorize them. The word the word how, the word saw, the word she, the word are, the word were. We are reading words that have phonics patterns in them that we're not going to teach for 2 more years. And we're not even going to teach them. Second grade teacher's going to teach them. But we have to read them. We're stuck holding the bag, trying to read words that we don't have skills to decode. And therein lies all the memorization that we do and why we are pulling our hair out in kindergarten, first grade, trying to get all these darn sight words under our belt when most of those we can actually read. Now, I am going to show you a very an interesting clip because this is a little clip of a guy and the teacher saw him staring sadly at this board with the word ice cream and asked him what was wrong. And he's going into this big, long explanation about why he's so sad when he looks at this word. And it shows where this lives in his brain.
Okay.
Okay, Robbie, go ahead. Tell us what you discovered over here.
Okay. E is like doing two things, so that's why we're calling him multitasking E.
Okay.
Because he's doing two things.
What is he
telling
doing?
the I to say its name and telling the C to say like the soft C.
Okay. And then what else?
CR, they're like a blend, so they actually say this.
Okay.
And EA, it's two vowels go walking. The first one does the talking. So E actually says E, and A says nothing.
Okay.
And then
What did we discover? What made your heart so sad?
M, he's all alone. He has no one to be with, but he has me to be with.
Now, kids are not supposed to feel sorry for letters. And what he was saying is all those letters come together and they do something as a blend or as a phonics pattern or as a mommy E, except for this one lone letter. And he viewed the letter like you'd view a child at recess without a friend. And the same empathy that he felt for kids, he can be responding to with for letters because what's used together becomes fused together in the brain. So when we use these social emotional super highways to track high leverage phonics skill concepts, those high leverage phonics skill concepts are anchored by those deeply rooted feeling based connections. And it works both ways. So you don't have to memorize that you need to help a child at recess without a friend any more than he has to memorize how these letters come together and behave the way that they do. That's where it gets really powerful. That's where it gets really fun. Now, it's not just multisensory learning in terms of see it, say it, do it. It's see it, say it, do it, feel it. Feel it's probably the most important of all. And if you do it right, if you do the see it, say it right, see it, say it, do it right, you're going to have a feel it. And I'm going to show you why. Imagine instead of using telling or teaching a phonics skill, you were to show this to your kids.
ER, IR, and UR love to go riding in cars, but they are terrible, awful, horrible, no good drivers. They don't even have driver's licenses, and they always have to slam on their brakes and say,
Now, you probably were laughing just a little bit as you were watching that because it was kind of funny to watch the teacher's face go, "Arr!" And laughing is key because that helps anchor that skill, which is perfect because that means we don't have to practice it over and over. And it's also the reason that this little girl was able to hear that and do it this way. Watch how this little girl tells the same secret you just heard, except she could teach it to your kids. And it's not even the first day of kindergarten. So we're talking first week of kindergarten, and this skill is supposed to be taught in second grade. So I want you to watch it and then ask yourself, why wait? Why wait? She wasn't even taught it, and she's got it, and she could teach it to your kids. Also, pay attention to what she says at the end because it shows where this lives in her brain.
Hi kids, do you want to know about the secrets about these? So ER, IR, UR. When they get together, they hop in their cars, they drive crazy, and they say, "Arr, arr, 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 arr." Yeah. So, what they do, driving their cars crazy. But when you grow up, you don't do that.
I love that public service announcement that she just kind of threw in there at the end, because what that does is it shows you where this lives in her brain. This does not live in the same place as phonics rules that were learned on workbook page 14. This does not live where the R-controlled vowels as a phonics skill live. This lives in a part of her brain that has a deep and already existing understanding of what responsible behavior looks like, what you're supposed to do, and what happens if you don't do it and you have to slam on your brakes. It's hard to forget what you already know, and you don't have to memorize what you already understand. She's obviously heard some lectures about responsible driving and how you're supposed to be responsible behind the wheel. All those life experiences, all that pre-existing understanding is what's rooting this brand new skill. So we don't have to do 3,000 workbook pages. We don't have to do 100 word lists. We don't have to say this 1,000 times. You don't have to memorize what you already understand. So what we're really doing here is we're taking advantage of these social emotional superhighways that are already built, and we're using those to track high leverage, typically way out in front, not ready to be taught phonics skills. And we're giving those skills to kids far earlier than they should have them. And then letting them decide when they're ready to put them to use. For right now, she may just walk around, see a word like her and go, look, teacher, and that's it. But once she knows the H sound, all of a sudden she'll look at a word like her and go, her. Hey, I can read that word. That word's her. But it takes both. If all she knows is the individual letter sound, she could go, ra. She can't read the word. If all she knows is the secret and she goes, she can't read the word. But when she has the individual sound and what letters do when they come together, words are popping off all over the place. That's the power. That's what happens when kids are developmentally ready and armed or empowered with the tools they need to start using text that's all around them. Then our entire day becomes a reading lesson. Our reading lesson is expanded all the way up until bedtime. There's text everywhere, road signs and billboards and commercials and menus and magazines. There's text everywhere. And the more kids that can kind of connect with what they see, the more that text is of value to them and the more that snowball effect starts to really take hold. Also, there's not a kid in your class who can't immediately see this and go, instant. So they walk out the door with this. When you tell a story that they already know, not a weird story about kings and queens and the antelopes and aardvarks and alligators and crazy crap, but something they already know. When you go with what they know, then they can get back to it without you in their own way, telling it in their own style, because at the end of the day, all that matters is that they get to the end of it, which is the sound, and that's it. That's the piece, that's the nugget that we want them to take away. So as long as we go with what they know, we don't have to repeatedly go through that use it or lose it process that the brain typically requires to hold information. We're cheating, we're going underneath. We're just taking these super powered highways that are already existing and have been on board and primed for years, instead of building a dirt road from scratch, brick by brick, that we have to lay by hand with repeated practice and use. That's the cheat. That's the real in there. And all of this lets us front load the code. Front load the code because we're giving her something before she needs to actually have it. But we will need it because of what we are doing. So we're not teaching it arbitrarily for no reason. She's gonna need to read the word her in kindergarten and the word were. She's gonna need that pattern, that sound, or she's gonna have to do a whole bunch of memorizing in order to achieve whatever that kindergarten level might be. And we don't want to wait until second grade to teach something when they need it in kindergarten. And all of its play. Play is stories, role play, dramatization, music. All of those things come together to be completely perfectly aligned with where kids are at these earliest grade levels.
Now, the fastest way to trigger social and emotional centers in the brain to engage isn't just through play, but through story. Stories are the fastest path through the brain's back door, and specifically the fastest path to activating the feeling-based networks. Stories have no expectation. So when you tell a story, it's not like teaching a skill because you're not looking to get anything back. Stories are the best teaching tool, especially at the early grade levels, and especially to wrap up this thing called the code that kids at the early grade levels need so much more, so much sooner than they're otherwise able to get. And speaking of stories, the stories I'm about to tell you make short work of some of the hardest pieces of the code, which are the vowels, short and long sounds, but taught as stories instead of skills, they become instantly accessible and easy, even for beginning grade learners on the very first day of school.
Vowels are actually the heartbeat of every word. You can't read or write anything without the vowels, so it's a shame that they're often held out last as far as both sounds they can make. So I'm going to tell you a super fast way to teach this, and then I'm going to give you 2 examples. The rest of them you're going to be able to access yourself afterward so that I can move on to get to bigger, better stuff here before we wrap up. The vowels are superheroes. They have a power that no other letter in the alphabet has. They can say their name. And I realize this is not impressive to kids nowadays. They'd rather breathe underwater or fly. But what they have to understand is for letters, they get bored. saying the same thing over and over again. So to have this superpower to be able to say your name and also have another sound is a big deal in letter world. So because they're superheroes, they have to have a disguise, like all superheroes do, so that nobody suspects who they really are. So for example, like what he'll do is he sits in the back of the class and he pretends that he's not paying any attention. And then that way, the teacher hopefully won't call on him, but of course she does. And every time she calls on him, he'll go, and he'll just kind of pretend that he doesn't know the answer to the question. And that's his short and lazy sound. Because that way no one suspects who he really is, which is superhero you. I'm going to show you one more. E likes to pretend that she is a little old lady, and she'll walk around and she actually will interrupt people on purpose just to really make sure they don't suspect who she is. So she puts an old lady bun on her head and some glasses, and she walks around and she'll go, what'd you say? And that's her short and lazy sound. And when she does that, no one suspects who she really is. So these are a couple examples of those vowel short and lazy sounds. Now you can look for the other ones in your download that you're going to have, and you'll be able to access those. I want to move to this piece because imagine now you can on the first day give them both sounds for each of the vowels. Now remember, you're not trying to get them. You're not a waitress with an expectation of I'm going to serve it to you and you're going to give it right back to me. This is a buffet. You're just laying out a feast of information that they're going to need every time they look at any word, literally, because every word has a vowel. And in every word, that vowel is either going to be long or it's going to be short, one or the other. So you can't wait until the end of the year to get the other sound the vowel can make. And yet we do. This is actually a tweet that someone sent me. And in this tweet, she says, and I'm going to make it bigger. She says, the program they use teaches this in the last week, unit 10 of 10 units. And this is very common. Sometimes these aren't even taught until first grade. And by these, I mean the long vowel sounds. She said, we had a few superheroes vowels pay us a visit this week. Now notice the date, April 19th. We already knew that the vowel secrets, so we knew they could make more than one sound since the first week of school. So we didn't have to wait until this week in our phonics program to find out, but it was a really fun review.
So her class has known since the first week of school that the vowels had two sounds and could either say their names or be short and lazy. But their phonics program that they're using in unit 10 out of 10 is finally giving them the long sound for vowels. And it is now April 14th.
Now think about that for just a minute. That's a lot of months to be functioning with one hand tied behind your back. Every word's going to have a vowel. Every vowel's either going to be long or it's going to be short. If you only get one of the two options you need to try, what the heck are you doing for 10 months in school looking at every word on the planet and you only have half of what you need to figure it out? That makes no sense, especially if there's a way to give it right at the onset, because vowels are the key to everything. So kids need to have as much as they can have about those. Those are the high leverage skills. High leverage means you get the most bang for the buck out of it. You can milk them for all they're worth. What I loved about her tweet wasn't just that she drew attention to how they've done it since the first week of school in kindergarten, but I love that it wasn't bothering her that it came up in the scope and sequence, because scopes and sequences need to exist. And that is what our districts want us to follow. Her logic was, that's fine. There's always a way to play. We can play with it. It was a fun review. And maybe the kids can become the letters and they can create multisyllabic words using what they already know about vowels. I'm going to show you the trigger to know which way to go with a vowel so that you don't have to worry about because the next step, of course, is if it can be long or short, how do I know which one? How does it help my kids to know they can be long or short if they don't know what makes them either or? So that's next. And that actually, same thing, first week, you can toss it out. But what I love is that it didn't bother her that her scope and sequence was a day late, $1 short. It's going to be, because the program's not the teacher. We are the ones trapped on the battlefield where we have to look at words and we don't have a tool to use to give our kids to attack them with, because those tools aren't in our grade level. There's a grade level wall that's going to delay the access to what kids need when they need it. We don't have to deal with those walls. Our program can deal with those walls. We don't have to. We can crawl right over that wall and grab what we need off second grade's plate. There is no grade piece of the code. These are all puzzle pieces. If your name's Howard, that's a critical piece. So it doesn't make sense to think that kids need different things at different times. They need what they need to read what they want, to write what they want to say, and no holds barred. Nothing's off the table. Anything goes on a buffet, because a buffet means you can't be overwhelmed. It's all just here for you to help yourself to, and I'll be modeling where to find it and how to get it. Now, Sneaky Y is another high leverage phonics skill because what happened was he found out that there were superheroes in the alphabet and he was mad. So he decided to be sneaky and he snuck into the closets of superhero E and superhero I, and he took one of each of their capes, which is where their powers lie. So now whenever he's at the end of a word and he doesn't think anyone can see him, he will always be wearing either his E or his I cape so that he can use their powers to make their sounds like mom E, daddy, candy, sky, July. When he's at the beginning of a word, he does exactly what he should. He stands up tall and straight like a good line leader and he goes, yeah, yellow, yes, you, yeah. But when he's at the end, he's always going to be sneaky because he knows no one can see him back there. Now, I'm going to explain about words like they, play, or today in just a minute. So hold that thought. If you're a step ahead of me, that's good. But just think about this much. Kids know where to be sneaky. If they want to bop Susie over the head, they're not dumb enough to do it when they're the line leader. Every kid looks like this when they're the line leader. They look like an angel falling from the sky because when you're the line leader and all eyes are on you, you do what you're supposed to do, which is why Y says yeah. But when you're at the end, that's a great place to get away with bopping Susie over the head. So it's easy for kids to look at text if they can use their own decision-making compass about their behavior to figure out letter behavior. So when letter behavior so closely mimics kid behavior, kids get this instant leg up on what the best bet is to try for that letter because it's what they would do. And that's where things get fun. Social and emotional connections, that earlier developing area of the brain that's already primed, already there, already driving their decision-making for behavior, we can use it to drive their decision-making with words they've never seen before. And by the way, this was very helpful for little Lily, who was a first grader. And she wrote this to her teacher. She said, my name is Lily and you helped me. Thank you. That's really a nice thank you card if you think about it, because poor Lily would have had to wait until positional sounds of Y got taught at the end of second grade to find out why the heck she's Lily, which would be really frustrating because you want to write L-I-L-E. And you're wondering why you have to put Lilia instead of Lily. So those kinds of things mean that there is no way to decide what comes first, second, or third when text requires that we put it together to make of it what we want, and our kids as well. Now, if you were wondering about words like today, play, or they, that's not sneaky Y. That is E-Y, A-Y, and they are just too cool like Fonzie. And I know you guys are all too young to know who Fonzie is, so this teacher is going to help you know, and he's actually a kindergarten teacher.
A-Y and E-Y. These letters are just too cool. So, with thumbs up and their coolest voices, they say,
Hey. Hey.
Now, if you think about having all that power with that much of the code, it starts to make sense now how kids could have what I like to call best betting odds for Las Vegas. And what that means is we're teaching the reader, not the reading. So we're giving them these tools that they can use to attack hundreds of words. Teaching the reading would mean I'm going to teach you the word they and play and today and yesterday. I'm going to teach you the words. We're going to memorize them like actors learning a script. I'm going to give you the tool you need to crack those words and also words you've never seen before. Words you've never laid eyes on before but have a Y in them, and you're going to be able to roll up your sleeves and fit up. Having the ability to make decisions out of the box in the moment about words you've never seen, that's where learners get this empowerment. And Stanford University actually did a great study on sight words. It was a brain study, and they were trying to determine whether to tell teachers to have kids memorize words or have kids read them. They were looking at brain activity to see where the optimal brain circuitry would occur when you were calling words or when you were actively decoding, and it wasn't even a fair fight. Active decoding had all of the optimal engagement that was occurring, and there was little to no engagement going on for word calling other than in the right side of the brain, the right hemisphere, which is actually where poor or weaker readers show activity. That is where dyslexic learners show activity. It's word pictures, remembering what it looks like. Again, like an actor with a script, instead of decoding anything and everything that comes your way. The problem is Stanford doesn't work with kids in kindergarten first. So when they made the recommendation, which was never have kids memorize words they could just read, they thought it would change our lives at the early grade levels. Like we would just stop memorizing things. And in some states, there are 300 sight words that first graders have to memorize in order to progress to second grade. So that's a ton of developmentally, horrifically inappropriate time sitting in a seat, missing recess and center so you can have cards flashed in your face. So Stanford thought, okay, so that'll all end now because now we're just telling you, don't have kids memorize words they could read. What Stanford didn't understand is our kids can't read anything. They can't read anything. We're not memorizing words because we enjoy it. We're memorizing words because the phonics skills kids need to crack the words aren't going to be taught at that grade level. If kids need to read a word, like for example, how, they need the OUOW sound. They have to read how in kindergarten, but they're not going to get that phonics pattern until second grade. So we are only memorizing words that kids can't yet read, which means we're memorizing a ton of words. But what if we could do what Stanford said? What if we had a way to actually read those words? Then would we memorize them? Like, what if kids could look at that word, how, and go, huh, ow, how? What if they could look at the word the and go, e? What if they could look at the word saw and go, ah? Or what if they could look at the word were and go, wah, ah? Or go, ah? What if they could look at the word day and go, day? What if they could read those words? Then, of course, we're not going to memorize them. So oftentimes what we just need is a bridge. You know, we want to enact the research. We're not being difficult as teachers when we're told that this is what the research says you should do. Give us a way to do that. Our kids are eating their shoe. How are we supposed to read words and not memorize them if the reading skill isn't even on our scope and sequence, let alone on the scope and sequence of the year after us, because it's on the one after that? It doesn't make sense for us in the classroom to try to enact a lot of the research we're told to use if it's not practical given what we're actually dealing with. So I like to cheat. I like to look at what they're telling us because it's valuable information. What's going to actually get me the most bang for the buck? I want optimal brain circuitry. Absolutely. I don't want to encourage activity on the wrong side of the brain. I don't want to train poorly skilled readers. I want to engage the left hemisphere, which is where high performing readers show activity, and that's where decoding registers. So obviously I'm all in. I want to do that. Give me a way to make that happen. Bridge where I am with my 30 kids who are eating the carpet and half asleep to getting them to be able to read words that contain phonics skills that we're not even going to get to teach this year, and first grade may not either. And that's what this is. It's a way to bridge what we know we can do with a way that we can actually do it, and taking advantage of what we know about the brain, not just to work with the brain systems of learning, but to cheat the systems that are locking us out or locking our kids out of learning in a way that makes the most sense. So this is where everything really just starts to change. It just starts to transform.
So in a nutshell, the blood, sweat, and tears that kids put into memorizing a sight word, what they get out of that deal is one word. That's the big prize in the Cracker Jack box for all the effort put into memorizing a sight word. But the prize that they get when they own a piece of the code, when they own a secret, a building block of the code, hundreds of words. A principal that was actually a male principal, he was at a workshop that I was doing for administrators, and he was right on the money. He said, okay, I think I get this. So basically, it's like if you give a man a fish, you feed him for the day. But if you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And the sight word is the fish. And that's exactly right.
Now, this tweet is from a kindergarten teacher, and it was in the third week of school, and it goes to show the momentum that begins to build when we teach in alignment with the brain system for learning. So when we start teaching in a way that lets kids drive their own instruction, and we're leaving a breadcrumb trail so that the brain can actually move forward and make sense of everything that we're saying because it connects back to something we've already said. This is the key. This is what we want to do to really streamline and fast track our instruction. And she did it so beautifully. And it was clear by listening to what she described. She said, and so it begins. It's only week 2 of kindergarten, and I'm modeling how to write the letter S on the board. This little one points out that it must have a grown-up secret in it because she saw the SH poster on the wall. So of course, she had to know it. Later, she discovered the word shark on her own, which then led to her discovery or her asking about the AR secret, and on it goes. Now, you'll have a video clip in your handout packet of this conversation, but for time's sake, the point is what I really want to digest. Giving kids enough of a trail to start sniffing out and start following. And the more they know, the more they need to know. You know, ignorance is bliss. When you don't know anything, you don't need to know anything, and nothing makes sense anyway, so who cares? And if you leave the breadcrumb trail and you stop it where what you're saying isn't connecting to the next thing that you're sharing, then the brain disengages. To keep the brain in the game, we have to make sense. And if we can do that, then we're reading and writing across the entire instructional day. So this questioning, this critical thinking thread is being woven through every single experience kids have with text. And they know, because you've set the stage so well, that if they can't read a word, it's because there's a secret you didn't tell them. And the fact that you would have posters up make this even easier, because they have a way to validate what they suspected, because they can see the letters in this word that they can't read right up there on the wall. So that way they know for sure there's a piece they don't have that they need. And what I loved about this little girl is she felt entitled to have it. You're the one making us read this. So I believe, if you're the one who's making us practice write an S, so if you're going to make us practice writing an S, I believe that entitles us to know the secret that has the S in it, which clearly is right up there on the wall. So I believe you owe us an explanation right now. And the teacher had no sooner told her that than she then wanted to write a shark on her paper, which clearly means she's entitled to know how she could use this SH in a word like shark, but now she needs the R sound. And what was really neat about it is she knew that R couldn't say his name. She knew that only the vowels could say their name. They were the only superheroes. So she was so hesitant to put an R down because she knew it wasn't a superhero, which meant there had to be a secret. And that's when the teacher was able to tell her about AR. And the teacher was so funny, because in a subsequent tweet, she said, I literally went into school that day and I had one secret on the lesson plan that I was going to teach them. And before 10 minutes went by, I had taught 3, none of which I had even planned. None of those were the one that I actually planned to teach that day. And now I've taught 3. And that's what we want. That's the magic of fostering and need to know and letting it drive the learning, so that students can really take control and move their own instruction. That's where the fast tracking happens. That's where the interconnectivity of the code is so critical, and it's so valuable, because the more pieces you have, the more they make sense. It's harder to go slow. It's so much easier not to go fast, but to be fluid. There's nothing better than a puzzle that you can put together when you have all the pieces. There's nothing that's more of a waste of your time than trying to put a puzzle together and finding out you've only got half the pieces. Not only is it of no value, but you're not motivated to want to play with a puzzle that's missing half its pieces. And the code can be a lot like that for our kids. For instruction, you will hear a lot about systematic phonics, sequential phonics, explicit phonics. That is all absolutely correct. But you can have more than one truth in the same house, which means that systematic approach that is driven by your program that tells you in week 1, month 2, day 3, where you should be, what you should be doing, like the Twitter post about this week, they finally gave us the second sound for the vowel. That is your playground that you're going to play on. That's what your district has given you. That's where you're going to flex your reading and writing muscles. The secrets give them the muscles to read and write with. And that is a different track. That is you taking advantage of any opportunity when it's needed to give what's so easily given, so they can start reading those words. And then if they've already done 10 times more than what they have to do based on that scope and sequence, yay, yay. So that's the difference. It's not that one has to take the place of the other. It's that you can serve both masters. That's really the key. You can be mindful of what your kids need, and remember, you're the teacher, not the program. I know what they need. I'm a man on the ground with them. I'm not on a radio somewhere like the Colonel. I'm with my guys on the ground. I know what they need, and I've got a way to give it to them right now. I don't have to wait and let the book be the teacher, because the book is going to progress much too slowly to do what we know from the brain science is the optimal learning. Now, nowhere is this need for more of the code sooner, I think, more apparent than when we just look at what our reading series tosses out. When you have a situation like the one I'm about to show you, you can see how it really makes it difficult for a teacher. And she has a choice. She can either just do what the book tells her, or she can use the reading series, the book, as a tool to do what she knows the kids need and what she actually wants to do. And she made the choice to do the second. Now, this is a teacher from a very high poverty area in West Virginia, and she's a first grade teacher. Currently, all of her district now uses the secret strategies, but at the time, she was the only teacher who did. And she said she would typically inherit kids from kindergarten who didn't know any of their individual letters and sounds. They just came as if, they at least knew how to sit. They knew what school was like, but they didn't have the skills that you would hope that they would have picked up in kindergarten. And this was an area where there was high methamphetamine use among parents. So there were a lot of issues with kids that were having some developmental cognitive delays, but they weren't able to be assessed and identified until, past these earliest grade levels. So for now, she just expected to have kids coming in and pretty much needing to start over with those individual letters and sounds. The problem was that the district was very scripted in their approach because they had such high need. And so she was told to use her reading series, teach the story that was on it, and she was supposed to be spending, or in it, she was supposed to be spending an hour a day, every day in her reading block, doing whatever the story was from the reading series that they were using, which in this case was Journeys. So in week 3, she had Curious George. Now, the problem is she's got kids who don't know individual letters and sounds. As a matter of fact, she says she's got a class that doesn't know individual letters and sounds. So her primary goal, her high priority need right now is to start getting those individual letters and sounds under their belts so that they could start to move into what was supposed to be happening at their grade level curriculum. The problem was, to do that, she wanted to run one way, and this story was taking her in a different direction. Because if you try to apply individual letter sounds to just even cracking the title, you get ka-a, ka-a-ra, i-a-us, ga-e-a, or G-E-A-R-A-G-E. That's Curious George. That's the title. If you try to crack it with individual letters and sounds. Now imagine trying to actually use this to teach individual letters and sounds. Kids will be thwarted before they've even started. And that's not what she wanted. So she also didn't want to spend her time spinning her wheels, checking a box and doing an hour's worth of, let's pretend we can read this by doing it every single day until Friday. And then by Friday, you'll have heard it so much, it'll actually sound like you can read it too. She wasn't willing to do that. Her attitude was, if we're going to do this, we're going to get something out of this. We're getting something out of this. She wasn't comfortable yet just looking at all the other things that make Curious George such a wonderful story. I mean, there's so many jumping points that you can take when you're reading a good story. But when you are so far behind the 8 ball, your gut as a teacher tells you, you need to get your kids caught up. So she really felt, and this makes sense, that her reading block should be prime time to funnel in those skills that were most important to try and build ownership of. Here's what she wrote. She said, not counting the individual letters and sounds, this story had 17 words that my students could not read without knowing these 4 secrets. They would have just had to memorize those words. And when I stop and think about it, it is mind-boggling, and it makes me so mad on behalf of my already struggling Title I and ELL students. Now, those secrets, they would probably not be her first choice as far as which ones to toss out, but they were the ones that kids would get the most mileage out of if this were the playground they were going to be on every day in reading. And this was the playground her district gave her to play on. Your district will give you your curriculum, whether it's a math problem or whether it's a sight word list, whatever your curriculum is, that's your playground. And you need the muscles to enjoy and to milk and to maximize the value of being on that playground. So those secrets, while, a TH might have been more of a high value secret to toss out, and of course she would have and she did, these were the ones that were picked not by her, but for her, by virtue of the fact that this is the reading she's doing. She refuses to teach the reading. She insists on teaching the reader. So her goal is not to be able to check a box on Friday and say, they sounded like they could read Curious George. Check. She wanted their engagement with this story to build the reader. What can I teach the reader? I don't care about teaching the reading. Knowing Curious George isn't going to get you somewhere in life. But owning more skills, owning more tools as a reader is going to get you somewhere. So she focused on those 4 secrets. Now, you already know the ER, IR, UR. OR is pretty simple and easy. But what I want to show you is a kindergarten class doing a little music video out of an I tries eon for size, which explains curious. And also, if you look at the words over on the right side, if you were to just try to memorize all the words, there's medium, there's aquarium, there's curious, there's immediate, there's serious, there's radiant. All of those words came from the story. So lots of opportunity to get that I tries eon for size secret some mileage. And then OUS. And OUS is a fun little secret as well. And I'm going to let this little ELL guy share that one with you, just so you can see how easily accessible these secrets are. And they are not contingent on individual letter sound mastery. They're not. It's a three-dimensional alphabet. So letters by themselves, the sounds letters make when they come together, not when we are taking this through the back door and giving access through social and emotional understanding that's already there. These aren't phonics skills. These are things learners already understand, their experiences they've already had, and we're aligning what they already know to these brand new, abstract, otherwise tricky phonics skills. So this is pretty clear to see, I think, when you just watch, for example, this little guy. So I'm going to go ahead and play a video clip of him explaining to you the OUS secret.
So the O says the O cry and the S and the U, so best friends. And she said us.
Now, what he's saying is, and he's saying it in his own way, which is perfect. When OU and S get together, it's just us. You know why? Because you know how three kids get together and someone's always left out, always, and they're just so sad. Well, whenever OU and S get together, poor little O is always left out of the fun, and he's just crying so hard he couldn't talk if he wanted to, and that's why it's always just us. So words like serious, ridiculous, joyous, OUS, just us. Now, this class is going to share a little music video about I tries Eon for size.
There was just a walking down the street, singing a doo-wah-diddy-diddy, dum-diddy-doo. He looked down, there he found, he had lots of sticks laying on the ground, singing doo-wah-diddy-diddy, dum-diddy-doo. He picked it up, tried it on, now he's walking and he hasn't moved some, singing he's here,
And if you're wondering what they're yelling out at the end, they were yelling out words that they knew that had I tries Eon for size. I was just walking around one day. He happened to look down. He saw E's cape lying on the ground. He knew that she was a superhero. He knew that that cape probably needed to go right back to her, and he had every intention of returning it. But he was just so tempted to see how it would feel if he could put it on and just make her sound for a day. And he did, and he liked it, and he didn't want to give it back right away. So he's going to give it back someday, but for right now, he's got his cape in his closet, and he holds on to it just in case he needs to have some fun and make a sound that's other than his own. So I loved the way they brought that to life and made it a play-based learning experience, and then threw out all the words that they knew that transferred to, because it's all about transfer. That's what phonics exists for, is transfer, to use it immediately, not later, not to do a phonics skill in a book and then wait until tomorrow's phonics skill in the next book. What do we need to unlock this word? Let me give it to you. And of course, we decide this based on what's most needed. So you're not going to unlock every single word across the entire day, or you'll never get to anything that's beyond the code. And that isn't the goal of what reading is. Reading is about everything that happens after kids can crack the code. But to get to all those things, you want to have the code in place. That is, it's one piece of it's one ingredient. But it's the one ingredient that if you don't have it nailed down, the whole dish is going to fall flat. Kids can't comprehend if they can't read. Kids can't build the vocabulary if they can't read. Kids can't sound fluent. They can't be fluent if they can't read. So, and by read, I just mean crack the text. So it's really the gateway to all of the other pieces that are what we read for and what we write for. And I love seeing the immediate transfer and the selection of what the keys are that the kids need based on the doors that are locked in front of them. What's going to get them the most bang for the buck? And this teacher had decided those secrets were going to get them the most bang for the buck. And by the end of the week, they may not know the story of Curious George like good little actors with a script, but boy, would they be comfortable with those 4 pieces of the code. That's the important piece. They walk away with an investment in the reader, not made into teaching the reading. That's such a pivotal point. And one of the reasons that point's so important is, guess what next week's story is? Lucia's Neighborhood. So if you think it's going to get easier and all become decodable after week 3 in first grade, and then you can get back to the alphabet sounds, no, it's not. Lucia's Neighborhood is next up. So it's not like it's going to cut you a break and then let you kind of go back and focus in on those basic skills that kids don't have. But the good part is, guess what we keep seeing? The pieces of the code are so much easier to learn than every word that pops into the page because there's only so many. And when kids own them, they own everything. So there's that I tries young for size. And CECICY that was in Curious George, is also in Lucia. So I didn't tell you that one on the other page, but CECICY, GEGIGY, there's a little tune. And you can see this in your download. There's a little video clip of kids doing it. So you'll be able to see it in your packet. But this secret's going to unlock not just George and Curious George, but Lucia in Lucia's neighborhood. It also explains the I again, trying eon for size, because there it is. And the OR that we had to use for George is in neighborhood. Now, guess what? We get to introduce a new one, GH, because that's in neighborhood. So it's perfect. It's perfect because if you're looking for connections, if you're looking for a breadcrumb trail, if you're looking to feed the brain as a pattern-making machine, there will always be something familiar in text. Text is everywhere, which means secrets are everywhere. And the more you recognize, the more connected you are to that text, and the more you know what you need next and next and next. So you may not need, well, you cannot, you may feel like you need to sit down and plan who gets what when, what will I do this week or that week? It's really going to be dictated by what you're doing, just like the keys in your purse or in your pocket. You don't pick out the key before you get to the door that you need to unlock. The door that you need to unlock dictates the key that you pull out. But if it's a word that you're going to be looking at every single day, or that's in your reading story that week, or that is in the name of a student, or it's a high frequency phonics skill, put that key on your keychain. You're going to need it. And then take every opportunity to give kids a chance to use it. There will be words in science and in math and on the lunch menu and on the hallway. They'll see them in commercials and road signs. They will see these pieces of the code everywhere. And the more they see that's familiar, the more they'll be able to connect and make use of those experiences with text. And that expands your reading block across the entire instructional day, all the way into nighttime at home when they're watching TV, seeing commercials, or reading a book in their bed. And that's what we want. That's maximum instructional value. And it comes with opening up access to the code earlier and faster, right with. Now, that's a lot to say, and this is where I'm coming back to what you've seen, but in a different way. Writing is the best window into the mind of a reader. So what you see here are beginning kindergarten samples. And this is first day on the left side, and then that's 1 month in. And 1 month in, they've been doing the Better Alphabet song. So as I said, it takes 2 weeks to 2 months for those individual sounds to kick in. So at the 2-week mark, half your class will be done. The other half will be at least halfway there or more. So that's a lot. That's a lot. Even if you just have half the individual letter sounds plus 4, 5, or 6 secrets up your sleeve, that's a lot more to have at that 1 month mark than, let's say, you had at the beginning of this workshop where you only had 10 letters and 5 sight words. So let's look and see what the kids did with that. I gave them in the fall. That was on the board. But they had to come up with how to put together, I like to what? So in the fall, they copied. And then this one wrote, in the fall, I like put apps. Maybe he was going to say, I like to pick apples. I don't know. But I love that. He put down what he had. He skipped what he didn't. And he got something out of that writing activity. And I even know where to target my next instruction, which is I'm going to talk to him about the I and the word like, because he clearly knows how to write the word I and that I says I. So now we can just see if we can hear it in between the L and the I. So that would be a great place. I could also talk about the L that's not in apples, but he gave me something to work with because he got value out of this activity. Otherwise, at 1 month in, if he only had 3 letters up his sleeve and no secrets, he would have just been sitting there playing with his pencil. And that's not helpful. And think how many hours of time in that last month would have been the same. This one I liked in the fall. I like to pick pucks. Great. I think this is so much more valuable than just going, what letter is this? What letter is this? What sound does it make? What sound does it make? I don't want to just know what letters you know and what sound they make. I want to know what you can do with them. What can you put them together to do? How can you take them apart to use them? Now, this one I love. In the fall, I like to make pumpkin pie. I love that creative use of sneaky Y. Obviously, from a spelling end, it didn't work out so hot. However, from a reading end, it shows me she's got a trick up her sleeve. If she sees the letter Y in a word, she knows at least one sound she can try for it if it's at the end. So she understands the concept of E or I at the end of a word. And that's why she picked it to spell that. This one I loved the most. In the fall, I like to go trick-or-treating. I love that she felt powerful enough at 1 month into kindergarten to try to build a word like trick-or-treating. We've got second graders who wouldn't touch a big, long word like that with a 10-foot pole because they would think they don't know it. They would think they can't spell it. She didn't know enough to be fearful. She just put it together, built it as she went. Like, she didn't even think about it as a word she knows, because she's not thinking like an actor with a script. She's used to building things and putting together with what she's got, just making do with what she has. Trick, tree, ding. Now, it's interesting that she can manipulate the positional sounds of Y, which is a much more complex skill than writing the Y. And she can't do that. She can't write the Y. She tries 3 times, and each time she ends up putting a stick up the middle of the Y. So she clearly is struggling with what we would think of as the easier concept, and yet she's manipulating for her own purpose the sounds that Y can make to get the I sound in like, and to get the treating sound for trick or treating. That's exceptional. That's where things get really interesting from a brain plasticity end, because hard things become easy, easy things become hard, and everything flips upside down. It's all about access. We can't cheat the physical fine motor skill, but we can cheat the connections in the brain. And that's how we were able to give her the harder skill, even though she hasn't yet mastered the easy skill. And think about what keeps a writer writing. She wanted to write about trick-or-treating. She didn't want to just look at our word wall and copy the word pumpkins. I like pumpkins. And that's what a lot of our kids would opt to do, because otherwise they're faced with a challenge of writing something they don't have what they need to write. So it's a constant catch-22 for them, like what we were dealing with at the beginning. And it doesn't have to be if they own a little more of the code. A little more. It's like one gigantic alphabet, and it doesn't just stop at Z. Now, this is where we end up in the spring, and you can actually see a lot more of these on your clickable links in your download. You'll see writing samples that are as tall as I am. They are amazingly awesome to look at. Not that there are not 1,001 things that need to be spelled better. Like, this one is like 10 feet long. There are so many, and they're actually on the clickable link page that you have, and you can see multiple classes in multiple states. When kids can write like they talk, they do. So they're held back by nothing. But what you'll see if you look at these a little bit closer is some interesting things. So look at this one. I'm a dolphin. I live in the deep blue sea. They're octopus, they're sharks. Now, by the way, this student he was very smart. Kindergarten, spring, but he had no support at home, none. So he was interesting, because he was one of those kids that if he had been left to what his support was at home, he probably would flounder, but he was really sharp. He was a foster kid. He said, I'm a dolphin, I live in the deep blue sea. There are octopus, there are sharks, but I could kill them with my nose. I can camouflage, so when sharks swim by me, they cannot see me. There are coral too, I could play all day. There's no place like home. I love that he would take a leap to write a word he wanted to, like camouflage, but he doesn't have enough text experience yet, because he's not reading. He doesn't have books at home to know how to spell the word see, or even they. Even though those are great guesses for see and they, both of those show me that as a reader, he's got some good tools up his sleeve to crack text with, because he knows what Y is likely to say at the end of a word, and he knows that EY-AY is A. He just didn't read enough yet in kindergarten to know which one looks right. But I know the more he does read, the more he will know. It's a matter of just catching him up with that text experience. The trick is, can he read? Text experience for kids who aren't reading is not useful. To just hold the book and look at it, that doesn't help you know how to spell words. But if you can actually read the word, that's the key. Because if you can read it, you do read it. And then reading allows you to have this idea of, okay, they is EY versus AY. But what I love is, in the meantime, he can build whatever the heck he wants to say and take his story in any direction he wants. And all the things he built here, he could use to take apart books that he wants to read in the library. And he's not dependent on home support, because a lot of our kids don't have books at home. And some of our kids don't even have a home. So that's just not a lifeline that's reliable. We can give kids what they need and then set them loose. Now, what's really interesting, and this is where I'm going to kind of try to pull together here to the end, this was a little guy who had alcohol fetal syndrome. He had incredible support at home because he was adopted, but he had some real severe language delays. He wrote, I had a fun swim, I jump high, and it's fun too. I had a great time swimming, and now I'm tired. First of all, I love his ow for now. Great guess. Picked the wrong one, but yet it shows me as a reader, he's going to be moving through text because he's got the ow sound. He just didn't know which one. But I love the word great because it's so wrong and yet so right. And the reason I say that is he doesn't have the ability to think about placeholders, silent letters, impacting sounds of letters nearby. That's not part of his ability to process, because he didn't have working memory. The reason he knew to put an E there is because he thinks that's Mommy E. And he knows that Mommy E will tell any letter or any vowel that's one letter away, you say your name. And by darn it, that vowel will. So if Mommy E is one letter away, it'll tell that other vowel, you say your name. And then he's going to have to stand up tall and straight and say his name. And that word would be great. And he knew if Mommy weren't there, he would have gotten great. Now, it didn't work so well for the word great, but it shows that he understands the concept that will serve him well as he's trying to figure out whether vowels are long or short. Now, I want to play a little clip for you to show you how this Mommy E actually lives or sits in the brain, and to show you why you can toss it out in the very first week of kindergarten, because it's part of what kids are going to need to know, which is the trigger that dictates which way the vowel will go. As soon as you talk about the superhero vowels and their short and lazy sounds, and kids have two options for what sounds they can make, Mommy E is the decider as to how to know which way to go. Otherwise, they're really stuck. The whole idea is leaving a breadcrumb trail. I'm going to tell you what the vowels are. I'm going to tell you what the two things are they can do. I'm going to frame it alongside something you already understand, which are superheroes and their disguises. And then I'm going to let your critical thinking take over, which is going to be that you see a word where there's a vowel and you need to know which way to make the sound, long or short, because that's the next logical step, the next breadcrumb piece in the trail. So when kids do that, it can be as easy as knowing what they do if mom's nearby. And this little clip shows you how quickly kids connect and apply this skill, and also where it lives in their brain. So I'm going to play this clip and pay attention to what he says at the end.
So when Mommy E tells the I to say its name in like, so it says like. It says I says its name like he's supposed to.
Did you hear what he said at the end? Like he's supposed to. He didn't talk about silent E and long and short vowel sounds. He's just saying when your mom's there, you do what you're supposed to. And when mom's not there, well, you don't have to. Then you can be short and lazy. So he doesn't have to remember a phonics rule. He just has to connect with what drives his behavior every day, which is you do what you're supposed to when mom tells you. That's just the way it is. So this is where things take a huge turn, because kids can have access and application of these high leverage phonics skills using what they know it for at 4 years old. And one is no more difficult than the other. And there's no extra steps in the dance, because you're not talking about random crazy stories. You're just using stories that already drive their behavior every single day.
Now, sometimes Mommy E just has to get out of the house. She can't take it anymore. So she'll put a babysitter vowel in charge. And all that means is that if there is any vowel that's one letter away from another vowel, that's the babysitter. It's going to do exactly what mom would if she were there. It's going to tell the vowel that's one letter away, you say your name. So words like making or biking or riding, kids can figure out which way the vowel is going to go without having to have or to look for an E at the end. And this powers them up for all those multisyllabic words that kids are.
Now, that's not new learning. That's not extra stuff to remember. Every kid knows that when mom's there, you have to do what she says if she's close enough. And if mom's not there and a babysitter comes, you got to do what they say, or if the teacher's there, or if the principal's there, or the substitute. This is something that is a framework of understanding that they can make decisions with. So this is not new learning. This is old learning. It's just we're relating it to something that powers them up to know which way to go for vowels. That's so critical, because as soon as they know that vowels can be long and vowels can be short, the next breadcrumb trail is, okay, so how do I know which one? Like I'm looking at the word can on the board, or I'm looking at the word hate on the board. How do I know which way to go? So this is such an easy way. If mommy is not there, that vowel can be short and lazy. So the word hate would be at. But if you want that A to stand up tall and straight and say his name, Mommy E's going to make sure he does. And then if Mommy E's got to go and you've got a word like hating, Hating, well, there's that babysitter vowel, and you know what he's going to do if he's one letter away. Now, one interesting thing is that if mommy is there, but if mommy is 2 letters away, so if I go back to this word, see how mommy's there in the word bitter, but she's 2 whole letters away? Her little arms are so short. That's the downside of being a letter, is your arms are only 1.5 inches long. So she can yell and scream all she wants, but her little arms are too short to reach over the head of those 2 T's and make that I say his name. And so the I gets to be short and lazy in the words bitter, because she's thinking, I can't get you right now. I'll get you when we get home, but right now I can't reach you. So words like butter or bitter, that's easy if you have that way to show kids mom's there, but she's too far away to get them. But if mommy were 1 letter away, by darn it, bitter would turn into biter pretty darn fast. So from every angle, from spelling to writing, it works in both directions. That's very different than just doing sparkly or magic E, because sparkly and magic E, the problem with that is that's not real life. So you have to teach me that. It's an extra step in the dance. And I have to remember an arbitrary relationship of if it sparkles, it's long. If it doesn't sparkle, it's short. You have to keep diverting from the reading and the writing, that immediate transfer, and doing this song and dance about sparkly stuff. I want to use something that already drives my behavior so that I don't have to spend time teaching that. We can just plug it in and use it to do this. And it keeps our eye on the ball. Now, I want to read this little letter that I got from, it's an email from a kindergarten teacher, because it goes to this babysitter Vowel strategy that sounds so complicated, and yet it is simple for even a 5-year-old to wield, not to mention a 5-year-old ELL student. So this teacher, she actually did a blog post for me that you'll be able to find. It's part of what you can poke around and see and play with on the Secret Stories website, because that's a great place for you to kick off your shoes and find all kinds of fun things to explore. But this was from her. She wrote, "Let me tell you about a little guy named Abel. He's an English language learner. He entered kinder knowing 7 letters and no sounds. Thanks to the better alphabet, he got them all by October." That's important because that's the longest time you'll take for kids to pick up those individual letters and sounds. But by October, he was good to go. "Yesterday, I sat down next to Abel and asked him to read to me. He pulled out Arthur's Halloween. I said, 'Oh, looks like a great picture read. Can you tell me a story to go with it?' Because it's kinder and that's a hard book." Abel gave me a strange look and then he was reading it. I was stunned. Later in the day, I had him read it again so that I could video it. Here he is reading Mark Brown's Arthur's Halloween. Now, I'm going to play a little clip of this because what I want you to watch is how easily he manipulates these higher level phonics concepts, even though he just finished learning a K like last week, because the teacher said he just finished his individual letters and sounds. This goes to show the simultaneous access of how meaningful these pieces of the code are when they're pulled in simultaneously together. He could have heard the story about Mommy E 4 weeks ago, when she was talking to other kids about it in a whole group lesson. It was just a story, just a harmless story. But at that point, that's all it was. As he then gained more and more of the code, all of a sudden that harmless story that she's been modeling and showing use for all the time is now connecting and powering up those individual letter sounds, because now it's all coming together to actually make sense. The more of the puzzle you have, the easier it is to understand. This video speaks 1,000 words, so I'm just going to play it.
It said hibernate.
Hibernate. How do you know that says hibernate?
Because it has an H.
Yeah. Why does it say I?
Because the mama E.
The mom or E. What do these two say? Grr. Why is that A getting to say its name?
Because mama E.
Good job.
And she was stunned that he actually was reading the book, because she didn't think that she taught him about Mommy E, like the word hibernate. When he reads that word, she asks him, "How did you know that word was hibernate?" And he explains about how Mommy E was telling the I to say his name, and then he knew the and then he saw the E at the end, which make the A say his name. But it's fascinating because she really didn't know how he knew. And for him to explain it, and she's thinking, he just learned a K last week. How in the world would he be using this? Because I didn't teach him. Now, in actuality, she did. She didn't teach him, but in whole group, she said it to someone else as they were doing a shared writing on the easel. And she was talking about Mommy E for kids who were ready to talk about that. And she even talked about babysitter vowels, which she saw him talk about when he was reading the word making. And he explained who the babysitter was and how he knew that. And this learning was happening alongside him picking up a K or a T or an L through muscle memory. It doesn't have to be linear. He doesn't have to be kept in the dark until he does this first. We don't have to be the gatekeeper of skills that says, "Oh no, my ELL learner, turn around. I don't want you to know this. Cover your ears. This isn't for you. This is just for them." It's non-conscious learning. It's not new learning. It's tapping into existing social, emotional experiences and understanding, things that kids can get instantly. They just may not know what to do with it yet. And the more of the code they pick up, the more they know what to do with it, because they see where it fits, where it lives, how the puzzle's coming together. The less of the code they have, the less they have any idea what all these different random unconnected pieces mean. So it's all about giving access to more sooner, and then letting that natural readiness to just connect dots take hold. So what she said that was so interesting to me is she said, not only didn't I teach him that, I didn't even want to teach him that. I had put on my plan that we were working on blends next. I probably wouldn't have taught him about Mommy E until after Christmas. And I probably, in all honesty, wouldn't have taught him about babysitter vowels until, well, I wouldn't have in kinder. That would have been, for me, I would have thought that's something he's gonna be, needing to get later. So she said, I was so wrong. Like, how do you how do you deal with that if you're waitressing skills out that they need on a buffet? Because what we think they need next, they needed it before. It can be used now. And that's where we don't want to put ourselves in our own way and in our kids' way. In a buffet situation, there's no harm, no foul. You don't have to eat the cake, but you're more likely to want to eat it if you see it, and if you notice other kids eating it, and if you like cake. So kids are the best gatekeepers of what they need, and when they need it, just let them have that. Now let's watch him do the same thing, but with babysitter vowels. Oh, and you're going to hear a couple students that keep interrupting her, and so she has to do a very sweet but yet frustrating redirect.
What do you need to do there? Is there a secret in that word? What's that I doing? Shh, color it. What? Go color it. What is that I doing in that word?
Saying to the A.
What does he tell the A to do? That's right. So try it again.
A. B. Making.
Right.
The house. Luke.
Good job.
Now, what I wanted to say about this clip, because it's pretty powerful. I love that a kid who should have no power over text plows into words that are unknown and cracks them. And he expects to have to work at it. He doesn't look at words as I know it or I don't, because he hasn't memorized words. He's used to reading as opposed to memorizing. And that's part of what that Stanford study was really pressing upon, which is what is your natural inclination when you see text? To read it, to call it out like a recognizable picture, or to plow through it. And I love that a kid who should feel powerless, he's an ELL learner, he's in kindergarten, he just finished his individual letters last week, and yet he's fine coming to a word and he doesn't know what it is, but he doesn't look at the teacher and he doesn't ask. Instead, he fiddles with it. So for the word house, he went, house, and you could see his little wheel spinning. And then he hit the words look and spooky, and he had to stop. And he actually had to shift because the OO secret, I'm trying to see if I have it handy. Yes, I do. The OO secret, it can say ooh or So there's two different sounds that he knew up his sleeve he could try. And he needed both for look and spooky. And I love that he could just switch gears. And I really liked how he plowed and tinkered with text as he went. He didn't just say the word, say the word, say the word. Every word was like a puzzle. It was an opportunity for him to try to make sense of and figure out using what he knew. He is the best definition of what happens when you teach the reader instead of the reading. Because if you teach the reading and he has to memorize the word house and he has to memorize a word like hibernate, there's an infinite number of words in the world. But if you give him the tools he needs, the the ow, the mommy E to trigger a long or short vowel, the babysitter to take over when mommy's not there for harder multisyllabic words, the oo sound, and the default for the sound, those are tools that power him up to read thousands of words. And we didn't even touch on the other ones he knows, like the or the or that ow. I was going to say ow, but he got that one. So that's what you want to see happening when kids come to text. You don't want to teach the reading. You want to teach the reader so that every text opportunity, whether it's a road sign or a menu or a billboard or a commercial or a book at home, every opportunity to engage with text just expands your reading block on steroids. Kids can't help but engage with text when they are able to connect and recognize what they're seeing in it. When they see familiar faces in text, familiar behaviors like sneaky Y, mommy E, the bad driving sound, the misbehaving. Every time they see patterns in text, those sounds pop to the front of their head, right off the tip of their tongue. And before they know it, they're sounding them out. But it takes two to tango. They have to know the individual letter sounds, and they have to know what letters do when they come together. It's those two things that power each other up. And it opens up the entire day and evening into home hours to become the most valuable reading block ever. As far as what to do when a secret doesn't do what it should, that's where the fun starts. When secrets do what they're supposed to, kids get bored because they know it. The brain loves novelty. So what's really fun is when they have to try and figure out what else could it do, what else could be going on. When you know what's in the box, it's actually really fun to think outside of it. The trick is we often don't know what's in the box when it comes to phonics. So it looks very binary, like rule, not rule, rule, rule breaker, rule breaker. It isn't. There are very few exceptions when you actually have the ability to think flexibly through what letters and sounds can do. Now, to help build this flexible thinking, what we want to do is bring it back to letter behavior mimicking kids' behavior so that kids understand if a secret doesn't work, it's just the next most likely thing. Apples don't fall far from the trees. Letters don't fall far from their sounds. So they may not be doing what they're supposed to do, but they're just doing the next most likely thing. So if a child comes to you and says, have should behave and river should be river because of mommy E, first of all, yay, that's great. It means you've trained them to critically think, to really pattern out information. They're like a little tax accountant that found a flaw in your tax plan and they demand that you account for it. So we want that. That's awesome. And that means you've got their wheel spinning, but we want to keep them spinning. So you simply say, you're right, honey. You're right. Have should behave and river should be river. But I have a question. Where should you be right now? My seat. Right, but you're not at your seat. You're in the next most likely place that you love to go on any given day, which of course is right up here at my desk. Do you know where the third most likely place is that I would go to look for you if you were not at your seat or at my desk? The bathroom, because that's another place you love to go, right? So that's the next most logical place I would go to find you. I would never look for you on the roof because that would be crazy, right? Why would you run up and get on the roof? That wouldn't make any sense. All you're going to do is something you're perfectly capable of. It just might be the next most likely thing. But you're not going to just lose your mind and run amok. You're not just going to go up on a roof. You're just going to do something that you would normally do. It's just maybe not what you're supposed to be doing. Now, letters are just like you. They don't just lose their minds and go crazy. You're never going to see an N say zzz. You're never going to see an L goes All they do, and it's almost always the vowels that do it, is they make a sound that they're perfectly capable of making. It's just their next most likely one. So what else could I say in the word have? Well, it could say but it's not supposed to because mommy is there. I know, honey, but again, where are you supposed to be right now? My seat. Right, but you're not. You're at my desk. So what else could I say? Okay, so let's try it. See if it works. Surprise, we got the word. What about the word river? What else could I say? But it's not supposed to. It's supposed to say I know, honey, but again, where are you supposed to be right now? So they get the idea that letter behavior is affected in the same way kid behavior is affected. It doesn't just go off the deep end. It's simply a matter of looking for familiar patterns and then going to the next most likely one. And that is an incredible learning curve for kids when they pick that up because it gives them a power over text, being able to think outside the box. It's very easy when kids know what's in the box. That's really the key. Now, I'm going to show you an example of this in a little video clip because this is going to come up later. And this will help you see how this flexible thinking works and how when you understand letters and phonics as behaviors, you can make logical deductions. They are able to be understood. It's not rule exception. These aren't abstract, black and white. It either follows the rules or it doesn't. There's no wiggle room there. There's no thinking playground there. There's nothing to think through. It's a series of rules and exceptions. Behaviors are different. By aligning letter behavior to kid behavior, to any behavior, we now have some logical deductions that we can make that otherwise wouldn't be there. And you're going to see this little girl making some right now. And this is an ELL learner in 100% Title I school, and language or English is her second language. So just listen to what she has to say. It's so telling.
Okay, Sophia, you're not happy with what Mrs. Mack, the word Mrs. Mack spelled up here, right? Oh, let me see. No. Okay, she's very not happy with Mrs. Mack. Tell me why.
Because in the word thrilling, there's going to be a space, and we don't know what letter's going there. And if we put ing, I is going to tell the I to say its name.
So what do you think I need to do right now?
Put another L.
Can you fix that for me? And why? And tell me again, why do we need to put another L there?
Because the I is going to tell the other I to say its name.
Because what? Tell me one more time.
The I is going to tell the other I to say its name.
So what's going to happen? Yeah, there you go. Thank you for erasing my mistake. So, and Oh, there you go. Perfect, Sophia. Okay. So now, Sophia, why did you put that other L there?
So that way the I doesn't tell the other Y to say its name.
Because if I didn't put it there, then what would that word be instead of thrilling? It would be thrilling, right? That doesn't sound very fun. Huh. Good job. Thank you for catching my mistake. I appreciate it. Good job.
And as you can see, part of that transfer and that fluidity of sound to print is reading to writing. What kids can put together, they can take apart. So think of the code as a series of blocks. Kids can build with those blocks. They can take that apart and reconfigure it to build something else. But if you own it from every direction. You can twist it, turn it, flip it, and flop it. And the pieces are yours. You're a master of those pieces. You do with them what you want. And only when there is more memorization than reading do reading and writing diverge. Because you can't build something if you only know it or recognize it as a whole. And you'll see that in the upcoming section with the writing. But the goal is to give kids these building blocks so that they are the masters of what they want to create. They can build any word, not just the ones you have on your word wall, but they can reconfigure what's in those words to create other words. And we saw that with the Curious George, Lucia's Neighborhood. When you give kids the keys to the code, then the world is their oyster. They can do anything. And that's where the real creativity can come out as well, because they're not bound by what you've given them to use and regurgitate back. Now, I want to show you one more trick. And the reason I want to do this is because as we look at things later, I want you to have these tricks up your sleeve so that you don't view things as rule or exception, even with secrets, because when secrets don't work, it really is where the fun starts. That is the next level of learning. And phonics or reading and writing are just the vehicle to this playground that is higher level, deeper thinking, really letting kids spin those wheels and maximize these opportunities to figure things out outside of just what are letters and sounds. Now, here is a secret that actually kids help to create. It's called the head bop thinking vowels. And what happened was, if you think about certain words, there is something, you can call it a word jail, you can call it a naughty list, but some words, like for instance, should, words that are just going to drive you crazy. The word one, O-N-E. Some words are better to just take a picture of, remember what they look like, put them up on the wall so they don't get by you again. When I taught in areas that didn't have a high prison population, we would call that our word jail, but it was more like an old-fashioned post office system where you had the wanted posters, and we had to take pictures of some of those words that we knew were going to try to trick us. But these words don't need to go in there, even though by definition of phonics, they are non-decodable. But we can crack them, so we don't have to memorize them. And all we need is a reason, a behavior that makes them make sense. All of those words, which by the way, are probably the bulk of what you would see as your sight words that are not decodable, can be easily decoded in kindergarten, which is so much fun because factually speaking, they can't be. But with the secrets, because we change the facts, they can be. These sounds in words like was or of or what or some or around or even pencil, all those sounds are leaning toward what we call a schwa, which is the sound. And when a vowel isn't making the sound that it should, the main default that happens is it goes to this schwa sound. Now, these kids, keeping this kind of critical thinking, logical explanation for everything mindset, decided, well, I think I know why this happens. Sometimes I know what I'm supposed to do, but I just don't always feel like it. Like I don't know whether I should. And so I just sit there and I think about it for a while and I go, and that's probably what these vowels are doing. So for example, the way that they shared this was a vowel sitting there going, oh, should it be long? Should it be short? I just don't know. And they bop themselves on the head as they're trying to figure it out. And the head bop, or the thinking vowel trick, is what triggers the sound we actually want. So what, of, what, us, done, around, about, it's the sound. Why do they do it? Because sometimes even vowels, even when they know what they're supposed to do, they just don't feel like it. And so they sit there and they think, should I be long? Should I be short? And that's the sound that comes out. And with that sound, they can crack all those words. So it's such a great way to redirect what otherwise would be rote memorization and guessing to something that they can actively decode. And the reason that I like the head bop thrown in isn't just because that's what makes you go, but because it's a quick cue that you can give. So if you're in a reading group and a child is trying to sound out the word, what, all you have to do is go, and they'll go, what? Because vowels are the first thing you check. Anytime a word isn't doing what it should, the vowels are they're the eyes, ears, nose, and throat of the word. And a good word doctor always checks eyes, ears, nose, and throat first. A-E-I-O-U or eyes, ears, nose, and throat. So a good word doctor knows that if anything's going wrong, the vowels probably have something to do with it. They're the most likely suspects. And the easiest thing to try when a vowel's not doing what you know that it should is see if it's just a thinking vowel. And instead of going into all the explanation, you give them a quick trigger cue, head bop, that's all they need. Now, I'm going to play one thing and then we are going to wrap this all up. So I am going to play this for you because it's a great example that wraps up every single thing I'm talking about. This is a Title I school, 100% Title I in California, multiple languages spoken, high ELL population, as you'll be able to see. And the teacher's really done an amazing job across all brain strategies that we've talked about, including amping them up with so much more of the code than they should ever have at this age. What I most like is she's gotten this whole brain exploding thing nailed down to a T. She's actually told them that if the upper grade teachers, because this is first grade, March, that if they find out how smart they are, they will be stolen. The upper grade teachers will steal them. And so they need to put locks on the doors. So that is something you will hear her say multiple times throughout this short clip. And I just didn't want you to worry about why locks would be on the doors. So I just wanted to share that.
All right, little friends. Are you ready for your next word?
Yes. How many
It is so big. It is going to be so big.
What word is it?
Okay, ready? 13 lines. Okay, go. Hurry. All right, I think you can too. I do.
Sound out the word and maybe I can do it.
13 lines. Are you ready for your word? Give me a thumbs up when you have 13 lines. All right, here we go. It's going to be so hard, your heads are going to explode. Hold on to your heads. Ready? Thunderstorms. Oh, that's too hard. I'll wait. We won't do it. No? You don't think it's too hard? Okay, go. Thunderstorms. Use your secrets. Thunderstorms.
I think I did it.
How's your brain feel, Luke? It feels nervous. Is it a good nervous?
Yes, a good nervous.
Okay, that's good. Relief. Thunderstorms. That's a big word for first graders.
No.
Huh.
First grade is better, maybe. I think I got it.
You know what? If you guys get this right, we might have to start putting
Locks on the door.
locks on the door because
Teachers go outside. If you're sending these to the teachers, then they might know.
I'm not going to send it to the teachers because I don't want them to come in and try to take you.
I'm gonna just make robots and we
Yes.
can send them.
Okay. Are you ready? Chin it.
Serious?
Chin it.
We did it.
Let me see. Let me see. Oh my goodness.
I am so nervous.
Oh, let me see. Hold it up.
I am so nervous, but if I don't get it right, that's okay. I can always just fix my phone.
That's right. If you don't get it right, we try and we just sometimes we work it out together, right?
I know.
Okay, ready, friends? Turn it around and let's check. Here we go. First sound. What do we hear first?
T.
Well, show me the sound first. And what two letters make that?
T.
Okay, check it on your board. Did you get it?
Yeah.
Okay. What comes next?
U.
Thank you for telling me the sound. And what letter is that?
Yeah.
U. Is he superhero or short and lazy?
Short.
That's right. What comes next?
N.
Sound. And what letter is that? How are we doing, friends? Good. Okay. What letter is that? D. A circle first and then a line. Okay. Sund. What's that? ER. Good job. Thunder. What comes next? Oh, that's a what? That's a blend. And what blend is that? ST. St. Okay. Sund. St. What comes next? Show me. Show me. And what secret story is that? O-R.
Yes.
Oh, we're almost there. Did we make it? Okay. Thunderst or what? And what letter is that? Oh. And what's the last sound?
I got the whole thing right.
Let me see. Show me. Oh, you even found all your secrets. Oh my God, that's it. I'm going to Home Depot today and I am locking the doors because as soon as those 4th grade and 3rd grade, 2nd grade teachers find out you're in here spelling thunderstorms, I'll lose you forever. Okay, ready? We're going to segment. Ready? Dots ready? And go. D. St. Or. And now blend it. Go. Thunderstorms. You guys are amazing. You're amazing.
And they really are amazing. And the teacher's amazing. And I love that anything goes. And she just runs with it. I also loved that, if you noticed, they skipped over the phonemic awareness because they were one and the same. I shouldn't say skipped over it. They saw them as the same. She had to keep slowing them down and backtracking them. So when she would say, what do you hear first? They go, TH. And she'd be like, no, give me the sound. And then she'd say, okay, good. And what is that? And then they'd say TH. And then they'd say, what do you hear next? You. Don't just give me the sound. Okay, good. What is that? You. They were seeing them together because they were learned together. In other words, when the kids learn that T and H aren't supposed to sit together and they go, it's like Michael's sound is Michael. T and H go, so they're together, they're embedded. Here he is, and here's what he does. There's the sound, and there's the culprit that makes it. It's a connected, inextricably linked piece that means that kids don't. It's all about transfer. The only reason phonics exists is for transfer. So they don't see this in multi-steps. They see it as, here's the sound, there's where I plug it in, because I'm reading this word, I'm writing this word. That's the beauty of having less diversion. When you have to go to a workbook page or do activity sheets to practice skills for skills' sake, you lose sight of what is the word I'm trying to spell? What is the word I actually want to read in this story? So when you can actually make everything instantly transferable, then the kids pick up on, this is what it is, this is what it's for, this is what I can do with it. The problem is, if you are moving at too slow of a pace with access to the code, nothing's transferable. I could know every single individual letter and sound and I still can't read squat because letters come together and make sounds that I don't know. So I can't spend a year learning those individual sounds without also getting to plug them in with the secrets. Just like the secrets wouldn't be able to be powered up if I didn't have those individual letters and sounds. It takes two to tango. And that's the power. Transfer is key for kids to understand how this all comes together. But in order to transfer, you've got to fast track it. And I don't mean push them. I mean support them, play with them, give them all the things that kids at this grade level love and are gravitating toward. Role play, music, drama, stories, all of those things, but always with the eye on the ball, which is we're doing this to read that word. We're doing this so we can figure out how to write this word that you want to use in your story. It's all about transfer. It's the reason that phonics exists. Phonics shouldn't be its own thing. It shouldn't take on a life of its own, even though it can. And it can intimidate, but it doesn't have to. at all. Now I'm going to end here, and I'm going to just tell you, there's another teacher came up to me at a conference, and they said, I have to tell you something. One of my kids who has autism, little bit of Asperger's, came up to me and they said, I can't turn it off. I can't turn it off. And she said, and I had no idea what she was talking about. She said, I teach kindergarten. She said, and he just was really upset. And I said, what are you talking about, honey? And he said, the reading, I can't turn it off. And she said, so I asked him, well, first of all, that's good. Like, I don't understand. Why are you sad that you can't turn off the reading? And he goes, I see secrets everywhere and I just keep reading them and I can't turn it off. Now, she asked him, she said, well, that's if you're seeing secrets and then you're able to read with them, that's really good. You should be happy about that. And apparently what he told her was, I used to be able to look at words in the classroom and I could just look at them. But now every time I look at them, I keep reading it and I can't make it stop. Now, the reason he was so stressed is, if you know about kids with autism or on the spectrum, they get overstimulated very quickly. And so they need to sometimes just disconnect and stare over here or look down or remove themselves from a situation. Sometimes they need to do a motor memory or motor muscle activity to kind of calm themselves. But it's important that they can pull away. So when he would pull away before, he would just look off into the distance across the classroom. The problem is, when you're in a classroom, text is everywhere. So in a kindergarten, first grade classroom, it's text rich. There's text everywhere. So no matter where he looked, he ended up with his eyes on a word, and then he couldn't help it because he was saying ow or oi or ing or or a or e, all these sounds of all these patterns that he knew. Didn't try to remember, he just knew them. They were stuck in his head, and anywhere his eyes would land, he would then see a secret, make the sound, and then without trying, figure out the word. And then he was getting angry because it was just stimulating him more. So then he'd look somewhere else and the same thing would happen. And it was driving him crazy because he literally couldn't turn off the reading. And I thought, what a great takeaway. Teach so kids can't turn it off. Like, teach them in a way where you're not teaching, you're giving, and then let them loose, because text is everywhere. If you can't turn it off, guess what kids are doing? Every time they turn around, every time they see a road sign or a billboard or a word on a commercial or the lunch menu, they're reading. And that means our little reading block is nothing compared to the text experiences that abound from the minute they wake up in the morning until the minute they go home at night. And if we teach so they can't turn it off, we get all that juice to power up our instruction. And just imagine how fast the snowball rolls. We're turning something that the time is of no value into of maximum instructional value. And it just gets bigger and bigger and stronger and easier and easier. I know I threw a lot at you, but I hope that it was caught, and I hope it sticks, and I hope it really helps you think about things that you're doing in a completely different way. Because I promise you, if you start taking these baby steps in your classroom and throw some of these boomerangs out that I'm calling secrets, and this whole mindset starts to shift, what you will see come back to you will really change your life in terms of what's happening in your classroom. And at the end of the day, all of this should not feel like one more thing, because it's not one more thing. It's 25 less things. And you'll start to see this big difference in what your kids can do, how they're doing it, and how much fun you're able to have again in your classroom.